Checking. All right. We did it. Glory be and mercy me. We've done it yet again. Here we are, streaming away, as always. Man, I gotta really actually dedicate myself and go get those strings. I broke a guitar string like last week, and I just haven't gone and gotten the strings. And I miss playing my guitar. My fingers are starting to callus. You know, when you play guitar, you get calluses on your fingertips, right? They're starting to decallus, starting to lose connection to the guitar. So I gotta actually dedicate myself and be like, I am going to go get strings. And I've got to actually take the time and go do it. Today was not that day. Today was just sleep. It was very clearly one of these big, deep depression sleeps, right? Hey, pissed off, how you doing, bud? How are you doing, man? You've been going through it, dude. You've been walking through the fire, man. You've been walking through the fire. Of all the stories I've been hearing, yours is the most intense. So I hope you're doing well, bud. I hope you're resting. I hope you're healing. I hope you're getting back on your feet, ready to go. Because geez Louise, dude. Ridiculous what you're going through. It's bad enough that we're going through this kind of COVID period. It's bad enough we're going through all this. Won't be reporting too much more on the convoy, honestly. It seems like it's hit a bit of a lull. My estimation is that the energy from that convoy is being picked up by the Conservative Party. The big news, of course, right? The big news is that Aaron O'Toole has been ousted, right? That's the big news of the day. I'm sorry to hear that, pissed off, man. I'm sorry, man. Solidarity, brother. I don't know what I can do for you, but I'm glad you're here, and I'm glad that you're still fighting the good fight. Aaron O'Toole's ouster as Conservative leader, as Aaron O'Toole himself predicted, is the party swinging back towards the right. Aaron O'Toole was trying to frame the Conservative Party as a more left-wing party, a more liberal-style party, because the theory of Aaron O'Toole is that Canadians won't vote for a far-right party, right? They won't even really vote for a right-wing party. And ultimately, honestly, there's already a right-wing party in Canada. It's called the Liberal Party, right? Hey, Major, how you doing today, bud? And so it's very likely that the person who's going to be replacing Aaron O'Toole will be Pierre Poilievre. Pierre Poilievre will likely be the fellow. I'd be very surprised if it was someone else, which isn't to say that there aren't other capable people within the party who could take it over. Even somebody like Rona Ambrose, Candice Bergen would be an okay call, I think. But I think Pierre is the fellow that's got the energy. He's got the energy. He's got the look. He's the one that the populace seems to be. I see more of him than anyone else. And so it's likely going to be him. And honestly, he's showing a complete willingness to galvanize the right wing, to make excuses for the Nazi symbolism, the swastikas, all of that kind of stuff. And so it's pretty likely to me that Pierre Poilievre will become the next leader of the Conservative Party, which hopefully means the destruction of the party. I am actually having conversations with people online, and the denialism and the delusion surrounding this protest is very real. Like, very, very real. I've been saying to people, like, because I subscribe to subreddits. I don't like being in a bubble. So I subscribe to subreddits that I would call right-wing, right? I'm doing okay today, Major. I'm doing okay. Definitely coming to terms with, like, I had a big depression sleep last night, and I can tell when it's a depression sleep, right? It's just, like, full of very wild and strange dreams, like really running the gambit all over the place. Lots of odd symbolism, and that feeling of when I wake up of just like, I'm just going to remain in bed. And so today is something of a depression day, I think, which is weird because I feel like today should be a celebration day for me. I feel like I should be honk freedom, honk. Thanks, Onward. I need a good laugh, man. I need a good laugh. Thanks, bud. And like I finished, I've been working on an audiobook, and I finished it yesterday, sent it off. Still got to do a bit of housekeeping, but that's fine. But like today should be a day of celebration for me, and it's just not, you know. Interim will be announced in an hour. Oh, the interim leader. Yeah, okay. I'll be interested to see who that is. I'm sure that Pierre Poilievre is going to be the next leader. Like he's positioned for it, right? And it looks like he's taken the right position internally in regards to this protest. But like the thing that's hey Islam, how you doing? Good evening. I hope you're well too. I'm just seeing a lot of people in the right wing because, as I said, I subscribe to lots of right-wing subreddits and things like this. I don't like to live in a bubble. I like to see what the right wing is actually saying. And when they ask, right? Because one of the things that I think they're a bit taken aback by or intrigued by or interested in is like, why isn't this protest galvanizing more public support? Right? These people actually do think like this protest should gain a lot of national public support. And when I begin talking to these people, they're friendly. They're not being antagonistic, right? They're not I think they are genuinely curious, but they're delusional. Right? Like they're delusional. There's no other way to describe it. That like when I tell them the reality of what it is to live in this country for many, many people, they just deny it. They just like, and it's like an eye rolling, like that's not true, like that's not what's actually happening. And I'm like, okay, bud, like, and I make it very clear to these people, like I'm not going to try to prove this to you. Like we're getting into like, what was the most egregious one? Like, I said to someone, like, yeah, we're not going to support this protest because we know what's going to happen. If we reopen everything, we're just going to be told, get jobs, right? And someone actually said to me, like, I don't think anybody has that attitude. And I'm like, bud, like, we live in reality. Like I live in reality. Like, I was the manager of $1 million organization being told to get a better job. Like, It really is time. Like my perspective of the right wing in Canada is that it's time for them to shut up. Like it's just time for them to shut up, and the people who are voting conservative just need to be ignored. Like it's, and you just know that the Conservative Party is gonna come out and they're gonna try to convince people that they're the working class party, which could not be farther from the truth. Like that's such an egregious lie, but. As I've said over and over, right? Canadians respond really well to lies. They really like being lied to. And so if the Conservatives start saying we're the working class party, there's going to be a huge segment of the country that's going to vote Conservative because they love being lied to and they love believing lies about themselves and their country, right? And that's the big fear for me, right? Like, because the Conservatives are like the antithesis to working class. Like they want to destroy the working class, almost explicitly. That like they have for the last 40 years engaged a class war against the working class, suppressed workers' rights, suppressed unions, destroyed the manufacturing base, done everything they could. Like the reason we are in this position is partially because of the Conservative Party, right? Like. It's the Conservative Party leadership that is that has signatures on NAFTA, right? Like, it's and it's the denialism that kills me. It's the delusion that kills me. Like, I'm telling these people, like, yeah, the nation is not supporting these protests because the protesters will never support the nation, like ever. If we reopened, these guys would just go back to Denny's and tell everybody to fuck off and get a job. Like, that's what will happen. And that's a guarantee. Like, that's a guarantee. And the people who are saying, nuh-uh, are deluded. completely. Like, and how do I know? Because I'm alive and I have eyes. Like, it's not even to the point now where we have to like prove a thesis or anything. Like, literally, I'm being told to just deny my own life's experiences with these guys, and if they got their way, if we all reopened and all the supports were stripped, because that's what conservatives want to do, we'd just be abandoned, right? Because it's a policy of abandonment. What do you guys? You guys are a chatty bunch today. Next is Jugmeat. It's time for him to resign. The only way liberals can be defeated is with a strong CPC and NDP, but Jugmeat is not the NDP leader we need. I mean, he's essentially just a liberal, right? Like, right now, the NDP is basically a liberal party. They're not really a leftist party. They're not really even progressive. That when you look at their policies and when you look at what they're saying, they just sound like liberals to me. And that's because the Overton window is so shifted so heavily to the right that we have, like, especially now with the ouster of Aaron O'Toole, who is at least attempting to pull the party to the center. So it'll fall back into the far right. So you're going to have far right extremism in the PPC. And then you're going to have like a far right party in the Conservatives that is constantly going to be trying to reintegrate the PPC back into their ranks. And then you have the Conservative Party, which is the Liberal Party. And then you have the NDP, which is like center left at best, right? Like what are these big, like what are their big ideas, right? Their big ideas is maybe we should have a minor support system during the pandemic. I'm not seeing big ideas come out of Jugmeat Singh. I'm seeing platitudes. Like, we need to do more about climate change. Okay, what should we do about climate change? More. Let's say it's liberalism 101, right? Don't promise anything. Don't actually say you're going to do anything serious, so that when you don't do anything serious, you can't be pegged, right? Like, at this stage in the game, I would expect the NDP to be saying, we are going to nationalize the fossil fuel industry. We are going to, by mandate, reduce emissions. And any complaint that is going to destroy the economy, the statement should be good. The economy as it's structured now is destroying us. And if this isn't what the NDP is saying, then they're basically a liberal party, right? And that's Jagmeet Singh to a T. Because Jagmeet Singh is just happy to be the leader of the NDP. Like, he does. I don't think he genuinely cares to be the prime minister. Like, I genuinely don't think he cares. I really think that he's just happy to be the leader of the NDP. Like, it's a nice prestigious position, right? His parents are probably quite proud of him. You know, like, there's that. It gives him a good foundation to, have a kid. Come on now. There's like an ant crawling around on my webcam. That's so funny. And then there really isn't a leftist option in like the Greens, I guess. But the Greens are in shambles and don't seem to be getting it together, right? Like, they've basically just, like, who's heard anything from the Greens, right? Has there been a report about the Greens recently? Like, we need, and it is starting to get to the point, and I say this all the time on my clips, my walkabout clips, like, it's getting dangerous not having a leftist voice, right? Like, there isn't somebody in the conversation saying, we should just decide to solve these problems. We don't need to incentivize, we don't need to market forces, we don't need to taxation, we don't need to do any of this. We could just do it, right? And there's literally no one in the conversation that's talking that way, and it's getting dangerous. Like, And the reason why there's nobody in the conversation like that is because the system is structured to destroy those voices, right? It's very straightforward. The capitalist system will destroy us in its mania to make as much money as it possibly can from us while simultaneously abandoning us, right? And Jagmeet Singh is not saying anything about it, like, because he doesn't genuinely care. He's just a rich kid from Brampton, right? Trolling the Ottawa chats is fun. Yeah, I've got a couple of things here. I'm going to go through what you guys are saying, and then we're going to move on. People who vote CPC instead of NDP because they don't think they'll win. Well, I also, honestly, dude, I think that there's a good amount of racism in this conversation, right? people are not voting NDP because Jagmeet Singh has a turban. Like it is as simple as that. Like the people who are excusing Justin Trudeau's blackface, the people who are excusing the use of swastikas and things like this at the protest, what, you think they're going to swing around and vote for a guy in a turban? Like, and I do think it is that simple. But what do you say to the people right now who don't have a job because of the mandates? 15K nurses were fired in BC over the past year. That's way too many people homeless now. Like, the reopening isn't going to solve this. Like, the extraction process is too deep. The wage is not paying the rent. Like, we have to start talking more seriously about actual leftist ideas. But there are no leftist voices because they've been chased out of the conversation, which is dangerous. I'm saying we can't stay in lockdown and shut down forever when the rest of the world is opening up. More people are homeless as the days pass because they are fired quite well. But Vince, like, the lockdown isn't the thing that's actually responsible for that, right? And as we open up, that problem will persist and grow. Especially because the narrative will be, oh, well, we've opened the economy, so capitalism can go, so we don't need these support systems anymore. So they'll gut the support systems, as they have been already. So they'll cut what little remaining supports exist with the excuse that, oh, well, capitalism will get the job done when it won't. And so, like, that's the sinister nature of this entire conversation. Is that the people on the right genuinely believe that reopening will be a solution, and it won't be, right? And then in 5 years' time, as the problem persists and grows, and we're getting told, just get a job, just get a job, just get a job, just get a job, then maybe we'll be able to say, hey, you notice how nobody was able to get a job? Why is that? And then maybe by then, like, 5% of the Conservative Party will be willing to listen to it and be willing to vote Liberal. Like, that's how entrenched the delusion is at this point. And it's manic. Like, it's a hysteria what we're experiencing. Like, no one is actually standing up saying the capitalist system is a failure. It never worked in the first place. It certainly isn't working now, right? We should have robust, healthy support systems at the governmental level. People who say otherwise should be ostracized, right? Because fundamentally the conversation that we're having now is, should people be able to have food and shelter, right? And there's a huge segment of the population that's saying no. Like, just at baseline, that people should not have food and shelter. That shouldn't be a guarantee. Right? And the excuses for that, the apologetics surrounding that idea, are as pathetic as people will be lazy, which has never been observed in the history of mankind. Like, it's just obscene grotesqueries that are coming our way at this point. Yeah, it's really popular among LPC haters. They used to vote LPC, usually vote CBC over NDP because they just want libs unseated. Yeah, like, I mean, but all of that is just, like, it's a grift, right? It's a grift across the board, right? It's pitting the working class against itself. That whole conversation that you just said is just the entire, just get the working class to fight against itself. Don't let people realize that their true enemy is the ownership class, the capitalist class. Everything's a culture war, right? It seems that lawlessness is okay in Canada. After the fiasco of these protests, how will anyone respect police authority? That's a portion of our pop is allowed to terrorize fellow citizens. Yeah, because they're white. Like, that's it. They're white working class. And so, yeah, of course they're allowed to do what they want. If this was a leftist movement, it would have already been cleared out. Like, there's absolutely no way that a leftist movement like this would be allowed to persist, right? And if people were walking around with the hammer and sickle, the communist hammer and sickle, right? There'd be no conversation about, like, oh, well, it's just a small fringe group, right? Like, that wouldn't exist. Like, the Liberal Party wouldn't jump up and defend it, right? Like none of that would happen. The right wing would abandon this whole idea of like, oh well, it's a fringe, we can. Not all of them are like that. Like that whole narrative would just die on the right completely, and the police would come out and beat the shit out of it, and then the population would probably be like, yeah, get these people the fuck out of here, right? Like that's what I would expect to see from this society, and that's something we have to be prepared for, right? We've got to be prepared for that, because like. I mean, and Ottawa is also facing just like a straight up practical problem, right? Like these people have like heavy machinery. They've got like trucks and shit, right? Like it's going to be like a military grade procedure. It'll probably require military personnel if they wanted to actually get these people out of there, right? If they wanted to extract them from the society. You're talking about like 50,000 people, right? Even if it's lowballed, like 30,000 people. But they've also got like trucks and semis and all this kind of stuff. It's going to be a major organizational feat to get these people out of there. Yeah, when will the Green have a leadership run? We'll see. Yeah, I like Dimitri too. Because he's the guy that's actually like telling the truth about what's going on in the world. Right? The NDP is kind of just like limp-wristedly being like, people need supports. It's like, okay, like why is that, do you think? And Dimitri's the guy standing up being like, the capitalist system isn't working. Right? We could do better than this. Jugmeat is a WEF Davos member alongside Freeland. He's a centrist neolib. Yeah, NDP, not a left-wing party at all. I mean, technically, I do think that you could define them as center-left because they are trying to reform capital. Like, that's fundamentally what they're doing. And that's usually the role of liberals, right? The role of liberalism within a society is to do piecemeal reform, act as a pressure valve for the society, right? That anxiety and pressure builds up in the society, and the liberals are there to kind of go let a little bit of steam off so the whole thing doesn't blow up. The current liberal party is not interested in doing that. The conservatives certainly aren't. They're interested in the destruction of the civil society so they can go back to Denny's and shit. And then the NDP are the ones standing up being like, hey, we've got to actually do reform. We've got to do piecemeal reformism. And so that makes them liberals. That makes them center-left, right? And I get, like, he's a centrist neolib. Yeah, like, I think that's pretty accurate. Like, the reason why the NDP is a center-left party is because there are leftists within the NDP pushing Jugmeat to the left. But yeah, I'd say your estimation that he's a centrist neolib is accurate. What is funny to see the same people saying ACAB and Frime like bacon are now calling for police to get involved. I mean, yeah, there's a bit of that for sure. And I mean, my position on police involvement and all this in the protests is like, to me, it's up to the population of Ottawa. Like, they're the people who are really experiencing it. Right? Like, if the citizenry of Ottawa stand up and say, this is too fucking much, like, we can't live like this, right? Well, they're the ones that are dealing with it. So the decisions that get made within the city of Ottawa by the police chief, by the mayor of Ottawa, right? Like, if the police get involved and if the military gets involved and all of that kind of stuff, it's like, yeah, like, that's how it's going to go. The cops are okay with these protests because they don't want to fundamentally change anything. Same as when cops let small business owners here in America walk around with guns. Well, and the cops want to go back to Denny's too, guys. Right? Like, the cops want their serfs back too. Right? Like, the cops and these truckers are in, like, a slightly upper echelon class, and they want to go back to Timmy's. Right? Like, the cops want to be able to go into Tim Hortons, and they want to be able to walk around without masks and shit. Right? That's what this protest is all about. Like, it is as small and selfish as it can be, right? Like, they don't care about the homeless. There's no effort whatsoever for, like, support. Like, they think they're helping by saying, let's reopen everything so everyone can sell themselves back to a capitalist death cult that's geared to destroy us. They think that's helping, right? Like, that's how reduced we are in terms of class consciousness. That one of the great protest movements throughout this period of time hasn't been people need to eat. People, like, when the cops come in and beat up homeless people, there's like literally no like where were the truckers then, right? Like they don't give a fuck about that at all. Those people should just get jobs. That's all it is. And so it's like they want to go back to Denny's, they want to go back to Timmy's. Like that's what this protest is all about. It's completely what it's about, which is why it's so like dumb and sad, right? Like this is the state of Canadian politics. That instead of being concerned about our weak and our vulnerable, the disabled, the elderly, the homeless, right? People living in poverty, instead of the 60% of the society that's saying, hey, I'm struggling to actually get food, like I'm really struggling here, right? Instead of focusing on any of that, it's literally, I want to go to Denny's. That's what it's about. I really hate how the mainstream media has been covering the protest. It's so gross how they're distorting so much of what is really going on. Well, I mean, I do have... there is every day now... Do I have it? Is that it? Anyway, every day there's a mega thread on Our Ontario. There's a mega thread that is also worth pointing out, right? More Ontarians were vaccinated for the first time on Saturday than attended the Ottawa protest, right? So, like, really in the grand scheme, it's actually quite small. Like, it's not to put a scope on it. The reason why it's so, like, because it's noisy, because it's trucks and shit. Also, here's the Convoy for Freedom Toronto on February 5th. And Pat King making literal domestic terrorist threats, and Ottawa police have done exactly nothing. 247 Ottawa residents asks, we got contingency plans in place for that, King later said with a smirk when asked what would happen if police tried to clear them out. You pushed the wrong group of people. Ottawa Mayor Jim Watson says the threat of violence has been too great to actively force convoy protesters and their vehicles parked in and around the city's downtown to leave. Right? Like, that's the mayor of Ottawa. But you see, like, it is actually, like, not a very large group. Really. Like, in the grand scheme. Like, it's not a large group. That we are starting to get into the conversation of political theater. Right? That this is like political stuntsmanship. There have actually been way larger protests than this at Parliament. Like, way larger. And which have been ignored. So you begin to wonder, like, why is this getting the focus that it's getting? Because it facilitates what the capitalists want, right? It divides the populace, it divides the working class, makes the working class fight amongst itself, while simultaneously forwarding the thing that the capitalists want, which is to reopen, right? And to pretend as though capitalism works. That, the problem isn't that capitalism is a failed system that abandons everybody. The problem is that we're in lockdowns, right? Like, that's the narrative. But the truth is that capitalism is a failed system that abandons everybody, right? And will continue to do so. And it'll become more obvious once we reopen and capitalism continues to abandon huge sections of the population. Like, it's not going to suddenly reopen and everybody's going to get a job and everything's going to be great. The rent the wage no longer pays the rent. Like, Conservative Party abandons another veteran. Yeah, can we get a communist to run the NDP? Good luck on that. And any communist leader that started to come up in the NDP would just get chased out of the party. I guess we do negotiate with terrorists. O'Toole and Scheer are the first of many of what will become a revolving door of failed leaders as the party and its ideology becomes completely and more obviously unfeasible. Yeah, one hopes that's the case. Part of the problem with the Conservative Party is that it's become it's too obvious now. Like, it's just so obviously just a corporate party. Like, it's not interested in helping the populace. It's not interested in helping anybody. And while simultaneously turning around and individualizing everybody's problems, right? And it's so apparent now. Like, as an organization, it's gone psychotic. Like, and everything that it says and everything it says to the populace sounds psychotic, right? Like, and it's gonna start overtly lying, saying, yeah, we're the working class party, and everyone's gonna scoff at that and be like, okay, bud, sure. Except, the 30% of the populace that keeps voting for them, which is actually terrifying. Like, it's actually terrifying that 30% of the populace are living in this la la land space where they actually believe. I don't actively pursue Max Blumenthal, but when he pops up, people on the left seem to be kind of offended by Blumenthal, and I'm not. Like, it makes sense that there are people who are going to go. It makes sense that people are going to go out into left field on COVID stuff. It just makes sense. And if someone like Max Blumenthal wants to do that, then more power to him. It's not something I want to do. It's not something I even want to really cover. But I suspect that someone like Max Blumenthal in a couple of years' time will come back with something interesting. I haven't heard of Convo Couch, but I have heard of Fred Hampton leftists. I often use Fred Hampton leftist stuff on this channel because their statements are really good. The entire protest is so grossly misguided. Only in Canada can a group of goons complain about their restricted freedoms as they drive without issue across the country and camp on public streets. Yeah, exactly, Tonnage. I don't know if I've ever seen you here, bud, but good to see you. Well, and like, even if they got everything they wanted, so what? Like, really? Like, so what? The wage does not pay the rent. Like, that's the central problem. Right? That's the central problem with capitalism. That capitalism eventually comes to a point where the wages no longer pay the rent. And so the whole system stops working. And even if these truckers got literally, even if Justin Trudeau stood up and said, we're ending it all, it's over, it's finished, we capitulate, it's done. Right? What would fundamentally change? What would actually change? They're still not going to be able to go to Denny's and get service. Why? Because nobody can fucking pay the rent with the wage. Right? Like, it's not going to work. Like, this is what I've been saying since the beginning. It's not going to work. Right? And if you're focusing on solutions that don't work, then yeah, you're misguided. It's just not going to happen for you. Right? You're not going to be able to go to Denny's. To play devil's advocate, their best strategy, in my opinion, would be to hold Poilievre for when Trudeau steps down. Yeah, I think you're right. And I don't think that's a devil's advocate position. I just think that's a good observation, dude. Like, don't blow him. Like, he is going to be the leader of that party eventually. Like, that's true. And who was it that said, oh, it was you. So I think you're right that it's going to be a revolving door. And if they're looking for their best shot, they'll put someone like Candice Bergen in the position of interim leader. And then when Trudeau finally does step down, which is an inevitability, right? That's the end game for all politicians. When he finally steps down, get Poilievre in there so that there's a couple of fresh faces at the same time. And he's probably their best card. Like, he's their ace in the hole, for sure. That if the Conservative Party is going to make gains, it's going to be with someone like him. He's very well-spoken. He looks good. He looks young, right? I could see how he could be attractive to Canadians that are looking for a boyfriend, right? Which is, like, in my view, most people who are voting for Trudeau at this point are voting for their boyfriend, right? That's how it's viewed. I mentioned this yesterday, but we need to do our own Yeah, what do you think I'm trying to do here, bud? If leftists are so mad at this convoy, then grow up and organize your own protests against neoliberalism. We need to combat it. Dude, I've been doing monthly protests. Like, I don't know what to tell you. Like, that's what this whole channel is about. Like, I've heard more organization coming out of the right wing of solidarity movements than the left. I want to see our NDP organizing something, but they won't. Yeah. Well, and I think a lot of it right now is COVID hesitancy. Like, remember, like, the climate change protests were huge. Like, the climate change protests were way bigger than this. Like, way bigger than this protest. By leaps and bounds. Like, massive, massive, massive. In comparison, right? Like, we're not talking about 50,000 people at the Parliament building, right? With, like, an echoing kind of protest thing that's going to happen here in Toronto or whatever. We're talking about, like, 100,000 people in Toronto, 100,000 people in Vancouver, 100,000 people in Ottawa. We're talking about huge numbers of people showing up and being like, climate change, right? Like, that's, but because the left has the biggest problem that the left has is that they like reality. And when you're in a position where it's like duck and cover, well, people are ducking and covering, right? And I'm seeing, like, the left is COVID hesitant. There's just no other way to talk about it. Like, they don't feel comfortable going out into the streets. And I've seen people who have, like, I've talked to people who have done organizations and who have organized protests and have made decisions that completely dismantle any power that would have had. Like, completely dismantle it, because COVID hesitancy. It's just, it's the name of the game, right? Like, I know this channel is good. I'm shocked the past week not heard anything from the NDP Green left about doing a counter anti-cap. The citizens of Ottawa themselves are going to do a counter protest. It's coming. It is coming. If you look in the mega thread, if you go to our Ottawa, they always have a mega thread, and it's like I said, it's the citizens of Ottawa themselves that are going to have to do it. Like, what are we going to go down to Ottawa? Like, we don't have trucks, we don't have cars, we don't have any of that stuff. It's the citizens of Ottawa themselves. And when the citizens of Ottawa start to come out in force, you're going to see it too. Like, the citizens of Ottawa are going to come out in force. Like, they're sick. Like, living with this is the worst. I can't imagine what it would be like to live. Like, Ottawa's not a big city. Like, it's not a big place, right? You are going to see a counter protest. It's coming. And, like, again, like, so much of it is, in my view, revolves just around COVID hesitancy, right? Like, we don't want to go out in protest because of COVID. But why isn't Judmead or Andrea doing their own? Well, no. Centrist neoliberals are not going to show the populace how to properly organize. Right? Capitalists will never give you the tools you need to defeat them. That's just never what they're going to do. Right? Like, their view is just, like, make a couple of statements, electoral politics. Let's get those same climate change protesters and Black Lives Matter protesters to join the ANCAP anti-austerity protest. Yeah. But now you're getting into, like, why can't the left organize itself? And the left can't organize itself because of moral purity issues. That's really what it is. Just like, oh, you think that about Trotsky? We can never organize with one another. Okay, bud. Let's get those same climate change protests and Black Lives Matter protests to join the Oh, I already read that. Instead, the users of our NDP in Ontario only complain about the convoy. Yeah. And I mean, there is something to be said about, like, it's fucking winter, right? This is another part of what makes this particular protest so unique. Like, winter is usually not the time for this stuff. Like, really. Like, people do not organize and protest in the winter for obvious reasons. It's fucking cold. It's fucking cold, right? But these truckers have, like, a unique situation because they have trucks, right? They have the ability to have, like, warmed cabins, basically, with them. Like, that makes them unique, and so I think they're taking advantage of the fact that no one else is protesting during this period of time. And that's another reason why it captures the imagination of the populace, because there's nothing else going on. There's nothing else going on, right? And to ask people to organize and to get, like, they can't, right? They can't. Like, you can't get a sustained movement in the winter for very practical, straightforward reasons, right? Like, where are they going to get their food? Where are they going to sleep? How are they going to be protected from the cold, right? Like, you can't just say, like, let's do a counter protest. Well, you can maybe get some people out for a couple of hours on a Saturday afternoon, but what are they going to do? They're going to get in their tents, right? Freeze their asses off. Like, it's just not going to happen for all of the most practical reasons that you can imagine. Like, it's good to have passion, but passion doesn't fill your belly or keep you from freezing. When COVID should be the uniting factor against neoliberalism, it comes to the thing that prevents left. Yep. Why not have the NDP and Libs join the trucker convoy in Toronto and convince them to join the left? No, because that's not what it's about, bud. It's about dividing the working class. That's the goal. That's the goal, right? Like, all of the other stuff is ancillary. All of the other stuff is just like window dressing and just interesting talking points and cultural observations and all of this. The goal of the powerful class, right? The goal of the liberal conservative alliance, right? The goal of the ruling class, the billionaire class, is to divide the working class. That's the goal. Right? So the NDP and the Libs are never going to get together and convince them to join the left. And like, that's not what's happening. Like, that's not what's happening at all. That this whole thing is to divide the working class. Why don't the NDP and the Libs try to unite people? Because it's literally not their mandate. That's the antithesis of what they try to do. That their goal is to ensure that there will be a disunified working class, right? That's the goal. Yeah, my family in Ottawa hasn't been able to sleep. The fumes are killing them. They can't go to work. Tensions are building. Yep. There's going to be a protest. There's going to be a counter protest, for sure. And if we're lucky, that counter protest will be so powerful that it will outshine the initial protest, right? Like, that's where this whole thing could actually blow up in these guys' faces. Like, I'm seeing an article. There's this great article. Yeah, conservatives hitch their wagons to the convoy protest without knowing where it's going, right? And that's actually a really good point. That the conservatives are kind of in a gambit here. They don't know where this protest is going to go. They don't know what the end game is. They don't know how the populace is going to fall, right? And in my view, the most dangerous aspect of the conservatives doubling down and supporting the trucker movement the way that they have is that a counter protest could actually gain national support, right? If the citizenry of Ottawa, so let's Ottawa has a population of almost 1 million people, right? So if only 10% of the population actually comes out, but typically what happens when communities are actually faced with these kinds of collective situations and there's collective grievances, there's a snowballing effect, and all you need is one day where, like, a bunch of people start to go out in a counter protest and they start to gather, and then that news starts to spread and it starts to snowball, and then literally just like Friday evening, everyone's on the streets, right? And it just is the event. And so you have the entire city of Ottawa just being like, yo, right? And snap one picture, right? That's the picture that spreads across the nation, and then the nation comes up in support of the counter protest. It could completely blow up in the face of these conservatives. Like, it can, and that's why what they're doing is quite a gambit, right? But again, the goal isn't to like attain power and then help the populace or push an agenda. It is specifically to divide the working class. That is the goal of all of this, right? So, and I'll say it over and over again, like, Trudeau doesn't care if he loses the election. He doesn't care. He's going to go off and become the, like, he's going to get a 6-figure salary to sit on some board of directors somewhere, right? Like, and then people are going to ask him, like, so what do you think about your time as a prime minister? And then he's going to talk about that, right? And that's the trajectory of all of these guys, and they know it. Right? Like, when Trudeau finally loses elections or gets ousted from his party, he's not going to be like, meh. He's going to be like, okay, this is the time for it. Right? He understands. Like, and it's the role, it's the way it goes for all of them, because that's the corporate power structure. Right? So, if the conservatives do a misstep here, right? And if the conservatives like, oh, we fucked up and oh, it's blowing up in our face and all this kind of stuff, like, the power structure isn't going to go, what those conservatives, the power structure is going to be like, okay, our gambit didn't work, right? Like, that is how they view this stuff. And I'm trying, like, for the past little while when we're talking about this protest, I've been trying to, like, kind of placate or be nice about it, but I'm over it now, right? Like, the ruling class manipulates the working class in order to divide it. That's what it does. That's what this is about. And I'm no longer going to talk about it any other way. There's no world in which the liberals and the NDP get together in order to, like, try to unify the, like, what are you fucking talking about? Like, the goal of the Liberal Party and the Conservative Party and the NDP is to divide the working class and have the working class fight amongst itself. That's the goal. And it's working. Yeah, winter's not the time, but people are dying. Capitalism is killing us. We need to organize in any weather. I'm so mad at the so-called left. Yeah, that's been my critique about the left, like the so-called leftists online, right? They're just not organizing. Like, they're just commentating. They care about their business. They're comfortable. Ed Gooch, how you doing, bud? Vince feeling the passion. Vince feeling the passion. What I'm curious about is what ultimately happens to that 10 million that was raised and is now frozen for review on GoFundMe. I have a hard time believing even a fraction of the protesters will see it. Oh yeah, dude, no, that's gonna end up funding like a political drive. That money is gonna go directly to the PPC. That's what's gonna happen, right? And a lot of what the conservatives are doing here, they're trying to get the PPC back on side. That's what's going on with these guys. Because, like, Capital wants a strong conservative party because they want to take over and destroy the country, right? That's the goal of the capitalist class at this point. And they can't do that if there's these fractures, right? And the fractures exist because the far-right PPC feels that the conservatives are not radical, like, extremists enough, right? Which, under Aaron O'Toole, there's, like, a lot of truth to that. And so this whole, like this gambit, right? This gambit is all about trying to find a way to reunify with the PPC so that the conservatives can gain power and then destroy the country more, right? That's the goal. Because, to remind everybody, right? The game is liberals maintain the status quo, maybe throw out a crumb every so often in order to steam the thing. When people get sick and tired of being ruled by liberals, right, it swings over to conservatives who destroy everything and cut everything and attempt to privatize. And then when people realize once again for the 1,000th time that, oh shit, conservatives are acting like conservatives, always conservative, right? Then what do? We blow back to liberals. And this is the way the populace is disciplined, right? The alliance between the liberals and the conservatives exists to discipline us, to keep us in line with capitalism at all times, so that we will, at best, accept status quo capitalism, right? And that alliance that is essentially formalized at this point exists in order to facilitate that. And now you're seeing an NDP pop up as an actual liberal party to actually do what the liberals don't do, which is try to get a little steam out. And it'll be the same exact narrative. Like, we'll go liberal, they'll start to just go like, and we'll all just accept it, because, well, gotta vote these guys or else the conservatives will get in, right? And it's just discipline. Like, we're being disciplined as a people, right? Like, and it is the strategy. And, but of course the conservatives, like, Capital wants to destroy the country and extract as much wealth as it possibly can. Like, they want the conservatives to get in, ultimately. Like, that's what they want. And they can't do that if it's fractured. So they're trying to get back in bed with each other and trying to make it work so that there's a credible chance that the capitalists can continue the plunder, right? Because the choice really is, like, plunder the society for the benefit of 5 people, keep everything as it is, so any policies of extraction or destruction can be maintained, right? Or maybe let your child eat today, right? Like, those are your 3 options when it comes to electoral politics. Tamara said she will donate an equal amount to each trucker that was within their respective convoy. It's estimated each trucker receives 2 to 6K, I think. I'd be very surprised, bud. Like, I'd be very surprised. Like, that's not how these organizations roll. They're not going to give any money to these guys. Divide the working class and use ID poll to separate us. Shame. Bernie showed us we could unite. Even though we sold out after 2020. We need truckers, Canadians against neoliberalism. Yeah, I mean, what we really need, Vince, is a class-conscious society. We don't have it. Like, we're not talking about class. Like, we're not talking about class at all. We're literally, like, we're just bickering amongst one another about whether or not we should let capitalism rule us or not. Or like, not even that. Like, not even that. The whole conversation is, should we reopen and sell ourselves back to a market dominated by billionaires? Or should we keep things locked down and actually have support systems? And it's like, couldn't we open up and also have support systems? No, that's not even a conversation. Like, that's not even on the table, right? There's no one at the table that's talking that way. Like, can't we acknowledge that the ownership class has extracted, like, trillions of dollars from the working class over this period of time? No, it's not even part of the conversation. No one's even talking about it. Oh, okay. Hey brother, I'm back. Have you seen Dr. Vernon Coleman on brand new tube? I have not seen Dr. Vernon Coleman. Because apart from you, YouTube is dead. Thousands of independent research has vanished. I mean, there is like a definite, like the Joe Rogan situation has gotten everybody like really, the misinformation line is, and I mean, to a degree, there's a credible position to be taken on this. And you know, people like myself need to tread lightly. It's a big reason why I don't dive into the COVID stuff very often, because like, first of all, I'm not an expert. I defer to the experts. And like, but apart from me, YouTube is dead. Wow, I didn't realize I was so influential and powerful, Adgooch. Thank you so much. We're going through a purge period. There's no other way to talk about it. Like, we're going through a purge period. And that's going to be true across all social media. That's going to be true across every platform is going to tighten up their misinformation policies, right? To what degree is that going to affect, let's say, political discourse? Like, if I start saying that the famine that occurred under Mao actually didn't happen, right? Am I going to get censored because that's misinformation, right? Even though the original statement is the misinformation. We'll see. But I do think that there is, especially surrounding COVID, like, things are getting heightened on that regard. I am far less mad with the trucker protests than the lazy left that won't counter-protest capitalism. Yeah, I'm with you, bud. Alberta's vaccine passport program may be lifted, likely within days, as signs show Kenny is preparing to cave to Coates blockaders. I got to tell you, I don't know that, like, when it came to the mandate versus when it comes to the mandate versus not mandate, I've always been like, I don't have a horse in the race, honestly. I am more or less of the opinion, like, I get why people want mandates. I get why people don't want mandates. I don't think either side is being hysterical or is incorrect. And when you end up in those sorts of situations where there are disagreements about how we should proceed, the way to do that is to all get into a room with one another, make a decision, have a vote, right? Have it be as transparent as possible. And then once the decision is made, everybody just moves forward like fucking adults. That's always been my opinion. So if, like, Quebec wants mandates and Alberta doesn't, let's say, okay. Like, that has always been my position. I don't consider them draconian. I don't consider them terrible. I don't think people are trying to enforce something now. Like, I don't, all of the, like, rhetoric that surrounds it, I don't buy any of it. I don't care. If a community wants to mandate and they all get together and the majority says we want to mandate, great. If the community gets together and they decide we are not going to mandate, great. What matters to me is what the community said, what the community thinks and how the community is moving forward with it. And there's a lot of issues that are like that to me. So I don't feel like I need to choose a side on this. Like if my own community, like if the place that I live passed a bylaw and was like, we're going to mandate vaccines, I'd be like, okay. And if they were like, no, we're not going to mandate vaccines, I'd be like, okay. And if somebody asked me, like, what's my preference? Like if it came down and I was supposed to vote, I'm supposed to hit a yes, no button for me personally, and if this was an actual choice, I would say mandate. Yeah, if it came down to it, I'd be like, yeah, okay, I'll mandate. And my reasoning for it is exactly the same as the reasoning for everybody else, which is I think it's a health and safety issue. Why shouldn't we encourage more health and safety in the society? We have regulation for all kinds of stuff, right? Like you wear a seatbelt, you get a driver's license, right? You here in Canada, there's licensing for gun ownership. Like all of that stuff already exists. I don't see this as any different, right? I really don't. Like I don't really consider it a like my body, my choice issue because it's a collective issue, right? Like it isn't like getting a tattoo, right? It's not. We're talking about a virus that can be transmitted and can have profound effects on people in ways that you don't anticipate. So if there was a button in front of me that was like mandate, no mandate, and I'd be like mandate. But if the community that I was living in, if we all did that together and it came down at no mandate, I'd be like, oh, okay. Like that's how it's going. Okay. And I just think that's being a fucking adult. Like you have to accept decisions as they happen by your community, right? Anyway. People don't like it when I start talking like that. People want, like, people like the extremism. People like somebody who's like, I'm voting for mandate, and if you say no mandate, then you're a fascist, and you're going down. Like, that's what gets the clicks. That's what people like, right? But it's just not who I am, and I don't care to be that way, because I prefer to live in a world that's rational, where everybody's opinion actually fucking does actually matter, right? I consider myself an equal to everyone. I wrote a research paper about how protests and movements start, and yes, it's collective grievances. Exactly, Islam. Like it's collective grievances. That's what really does get it done. And again, that's why I say like the hurdle that capitalism is going to be facing is not going to come because a group of people get together and create like an intellectual like we could structure this so that it would be more efficient and actually have it like it's not going to be based on ideas. Right? Like, we're not going to have an idea-based protest or an idea-based movement that's going to do, like, it's literally going to be, hey, there's 2 million people and they're in the streets and they're homeless and they can't get jobs because the jobs don't exist. Like, that's what's actually going to happen, right? And so our role and our goal in this is to be prepared for it so that when it happens, we can start to pull people in our direction instead of towards, like, a trucker's convoy, which their solutions are going to be extraordinarily far right. You guys are chatty today, man. We haven't even done the number. Telling people to grow up and that they're lazy isn't going to make people warm to leftist ideas. Yeah. Communism is the ideology of optimism, right? It's the idea that we can do better than this, right? That it is possible. Like, communists get accused of being nihilists, but what's more nihilistic than capitalism saying this is it, this is the end of history, this is the best that we can do, we can never do better than this, right? Like that's a very negative view of humanity. That's a very negative view of things. Vince, man, you're in the passion space. I can tell, dude. Yeah, we need our own protest against capitalism. Absolutely. Like, I completely agree with that. The Breach has a great article, How the Left Can Learn from the Right. Yes, and we should be learning from this. Like, the convoy protest is a great learning experience, right? We shouldn't just reject what's happening because we don't agree with their principles. Like, there are practical things that we can pull out of it. Like, I would argue that the major two things that should be done by any protest movement is, one, get ahead of your extremists, right? Don't let your opponents define your movement, right? Like, that's 100% what happened with these guys. The Nazi swastikas, the Confederate flags, the "Don't Tread on Me" signs, all that kind of stuff. That took the forefront, and there was no one pushing forward a narrative that we oppose this, right? This is not what this movement is about. Like, they started to do that, but it was a reaction and it was too late. So, number one, you got to get ahead of that. So for us as leftists, it's getting ahead of the people who want to do vandalism, like the Black Bloc, right? These kinds of organizations. Getting ahead of them, making public statements. Every single time you talk, you say, we reject the policies of property destruction or of violence, right? Making it very clear, being ahead of it. And then the second thing is you have to have a disciplined enough group of people who understand not to antagonize the locals. Like, there's no two ways about it, guys. Like, you can be as sympathetic as you would like to this movement, but the reality is that the locals hate these fucking guys. Like, they hate them. And it's not just the noise. It's not just the disruption, right? Like, there are stories of people, like, going into homeless shelters and stealing food from homeless people, defecating in front of mosques, right? Like, going into Sikh mosques and taking stuff from the Sikhs. Like, these stories exist and they are real. And if that's how your group is going to act, the populace is going to respond to it. Like, we are going to see a counter protest to this. Like, there's just you can't do this to a community. You just can't. They're not going to lie down and take it. Did anyone ever find out where Tamara Lich is? I didn't even realize she was gone. I love that her name is Tamara Lich. Like, she's a fucking undead ghoul. Like, you guys know what a lich is, right? D&D lich. Right? Like, when I hear Tamara Lich, this is what I think. This is who Tamara Lich is in my mind. Right? Like, if this woman was being interviewed and then suddenly had like a cloud of smoke exploded or something, like somebody runs up to her and like thrusts a cross in her face, and then a cloud of smoke erupts, and then she like transmogrifies into this, and is like, Skrrr! And then like starts casting spells and shit, I'd be like, yeah, all right, cool. It's just an unfortunate last name is what I'm trying to get. It's no Faith Goldie. It's no fucking Faith Goldie. Who's running? MP Marilyn Gladwell tells Evan Solomon she's running to be interim Conservative Party leader. Yeah, that's to be expected. The Conservatives have like a strategy of electing females and electing women into the position of interim leadership, and so that they can then bounce back to the male for the leadership. That's good for Marilyn Gladwell, right? Good for her. People are demoralized, yeah. So you believe guilting people into participation is a working model of organization? Hard disagree. I mean, not guilting, organizing the ways they are organizing the convoy. Yeah, solidarity forever for left to right. We must unify against capitalism. The convoy proved it is possible. Oh, well, I mean, Vince, it's not even just the convoy. Like, the left has organized major events. Like, the climate change protests were major. The Occupy movement was major, right? Like, the left is more than capable of organizing and doing these events. I just think that, like, it's winter, there's COVID, right? Like, and the left is far more skittish of COVID than the right. Good on you, mother truckers. You must be getting through, mate. Your country's standing up. Democratic communism with cap wealth. Come on, keep saying it. We believe in you. Pretty sure the mass agree. That's a positive view, Adgooch. That's a positive view. I hope so. I mean, we know that liberals, the people within the Liberal Party, right? Not the leadership, but the people within the Liberal Party do support something like a basic income, right? So, like, and they also support taxation on the wealthy. Like, my question for people who are voting liberal is, why are you still voting liberal? Like, your party isn't actually doing the things that you support, right? And yet you keep voting for them. Like, it's very odd to me, frankly. And I'm more or less of the opinion that the populace should swing over to the NDP, not because there is like an actual, like the NDP's not actually going to do anything, but just to scare the capitalist power structure, right? Just to scare the shit out of it. Like a swing over to the NDP would scare the shit out of the conservative power structure. Like you want some anti-communist rhetoric start to come out of the society, you're going to see it if the populace did that. All right. I'm going to finish this up. We're going to do, you guys are starting to pick the numbers, so I got to, exactly, you're correct. Even if I don't agree, I will conform to whatever the mass choose. Democratic communism with capped wealth. Yeah, I've never heard it expressed that way, Ed Gooch, but you're right. Like, well, and most communist societies end up being democratic, right? They're just not Western politics, right? Senator Josh Hawley is calling on Biden administration to drop longstanding U.S. support for Ukraine's eventual membership to NATO. What? I'll talk about that in a minute. Remind me of this, Vince, the Ukraine situation. Like, the Americans are incentivized to de-escalate. The more research I've been doing on this, the more I see that I think John... I listened to a lecture and his perspective of this. John Meyer, I believe his name is. He's talking about this as if it's like the Americans stumbled into that. They didn't think it was going to be that big a deal, right? Like, they were looking at Ukraine going, oh, Ukraine is not part of NATO. Ukraine could be part of NATO. Why shouldn't Ukraine be part of NATO? Let's get Ukraine to be part of NATO. What a great day for America and democracy, right? Democracy spreading and all that kind of stuff, right? And so they started to do it with Ukraine. And they just didn't really put together that, like, Russia's over there looking at NATO, the organization that was put together to destroy it, right? NATO was put together in order to confront Russia and destroy it. That's the reason NATO exists. Expanding into a country that shares a border with Russia. And Russia's position is very much like, nope, not going to let you put nuclear bombs on our border, right? Which, even if the Americans didn't intend to do that, like, that's what it fucking looks like. And I think the Americans are finally starting to come to the realization that, like, oh shit, yeah, like, we stepped in it. Like, we literally should not be trying to get Ukraine into NATO. That NATO should exist as a buffer state. Like, NATO should actually be independent. Because Russia is one of the world's great powers, and the United States is too, and its allegiance with NATO moving into Ukraine looks very threatening. So I think that there's a lot of backpedaling going on in Ukraine right now, because I really do think the United States, that, like, the United States wasn't moving into Ukraine being like, and then we'll fuck over Russia. Yeah, we'll fuck over Russia. Ha 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 ha. I think they literally were just like, oh, Ukraine's independent. We can make them an ally. That's the extent of it. And they just didn't, because why would America think about the rest of the world? They never do, right? They don't care what the rest of the world has to say. They don't care what the rest of the world thinks. That if they had have paused for 2 seconds and been like, what will Russia think of this? But they didn't. So they just started doing it. And then Russia was like, excuse me, NATO? No thanks. Like, no thanks, Cold War edifice that exists to destroy Russia. No thanks. Hey, Demand Better, how you doing, bud? I think Bernie will sign on, yeah. No, I mean, and Ukraine should be a buffer state. It should be, right? I love how the auto occupation's getting more people to consider defunding the police. Oh, I haven't heard that take, Demand Better. That's an interesting take. Have you made a video about that? That's an interesting take that I haven't heard. What's leading you to that? The need for a clear definition of your movement is the original motivation for publishing the Communist Manifesto. Yeah? Meet this nursery tale of the specter of communism with a manifesto of the party. Yeah, interesting observation, Loaf. You're right on the money with that. All right, you guys are doing this, so let's Nova Scotia. John Mearsheimer sounds like the pipe. He's a professor at the University of Chicago. But his takes are very clear, right? They're clear-minded, and I tend to agree. Okay. I'm going with one. Let's do this. This one's what? So
here we go for
we got a
today's
3,
number.
we got a 9, we
It's
got another 9, a 4,
February
another
2,
3, a 2. Here we go.
2022. 10 balls. Each ball has a number.
Each ball has a number.
Numbers 1 through 10. Swirl the numbers.
Swirl the numbers. Here we
Pick
go.
a number.
Got another 6. What'd I say? I said 1? I said 1? Here we go.
Today's
Come on,
number
big one.
is
9.
9.
There's a couple of 9s in the table. Grinning, you got a 9. Harry, you had a 9. Boop, 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 boop. Islam, you came in late, but I'll give it to you anyway. A 9 for Islam, because I know there's a delay, so I'll believe you. Man, I'm looking forward to getting my strings back, man. Because now I could be playing a song, right? I could be playing a song right now. I'm a wiener! Exactly. Lots of people on Twitter have been using Ottawa Police Failed, Defund the Police, and related slogans. Cool, bud. Cool, bud. I don't think, like, if my position on that is that there's absolutely nothing the Ottawa Police could do, right? That they will be overwhelmed by this. That's to be expected. Like, for fuck's sake, you got 50,000 truckers descending with big fucking semis and trucks and stuff. Like, your police force is going to be overwhelmed by that. And the police chief of Ottawa has said that if they wanted to extract these guys, it would be they would need the military. Like, so I don't know that take is necessarily fair, but at the same time, you know, hashtag defund the police. So 4chan found out where Trudeau is hiding. That's amazing, dude. That's hilarious. And of course, people make hay about this. Like, Trudeau is hiding. Like, fuck you. Like, Trudeau is the leader of the country. Like, what do you want him to do? You want him to go out there and actually, like do battle? Like, come on. Like, it's like when Harper took a whole lot of heat and got mocked a lot because when a gunman came onto Parliament Hill with the intent of shooting Stephen Harper, they, like, whisked Harper away into a secure room. And everyone was like, oh, what a pussy. And I'm like, what the fuck are you talking about? Like, Harper's the leader of the country, right? Like, what did you want him to do? You want him to take out a shotgun and, like, go down there and start hunting this guy? Like, that's not what's going to fucking happen, right? And, like, yeah, when this event is occurring, like, and it's not Trudeau is hiding. It's like, yeah, the leader of the country is in a safe space so that some fucking Yahoo can't just shoot him. Like, yeah. Yeah, and Trudeau's got the COVIDs. Trudeau's got the COVIDs. That's the narrative anyway. Trudeau's got the COVIDs. But you agree money isn't bad, so we not have a capitalist society if it is a true democracy. Obviously, wealth has to be capped, because that's the best thing you have said. Corruption loves money. The conversation surrounding money is interesting. It's an interesting one. Like, my position, more or less, is that I wish we didn't need to do money, but that the populace is not ready to get away with, like, to do away with money. It's a very Trotskyist position that, like, the goal should be to build a society in which the value of money begins to simply wither away. That money exists as the commodity that it exists, but it's so beside the point that the people themselves start to diminish its value. It ceases being this all-encompassing, defining characteristic of your society, and it just becomes like an old edifice, like an old, like a relic, just something that we used to really care about, and now it's still here, but, like, we don't really care about it as much as all that, right? And that to me is the end game with money. That I don't think you could just be like, money's gone, everybody, because you can't make those kinds of leaps without taking the populace. You're crapping on Reed again? What? I don't know what you mean, Aguch. Sorry, bud. Will tanks roll into Ottawa? I'd be surprised. Just the optics of that alone is really bad. Like, a tank is bad optics across the board, right? It has a very authoritarian sort of a look. But military could get involved, right? And they'll use like APCs and stuff like that. Like that looks a little bit less imposing. And the big reason why they wouldn't roll tanks in is just like, why? Like, we don't need a tank. Like a tank. Like, no. Like they'll use like Jeeps and stuff. Yeah, they'll get the Tiananmen Square narrative. And also, I think that would be a really big way to inflame that movement, right? If I wanted to inflame the far right in this country, it would be to roll tanks into Ottawa. Like, what better way to get them to start being like, this is communism. This is just like a communist society. This is Tiananmen Square. Yeah, not like they can shell the streets, or like, what are they going to do? They're going to roll over a semi? Like, nah. None of that's going to happen. But the military could get involved. But the military won't get involved until the populace actually does something. Until it's been made fairly clear, right? Like, if Trudeau uses the military to clear out these protesters right now, that lends a lot of credibility to it being done for political reasons. But if the people of Ottawa stand up and launch a counter-protest and it gains national support, and then Trudeau moves forward with the military, then you can pretty clearly, like, they'll still bitch about it, but the rest of the populace is going to be like, nah, it was made pretty clear, dude. Like, it's over. Yeah, we need money to be divorced from power, but retain some of its functions. Yeah, and to me, the way to do that is to create a wealth cap, like Ad Gooch has been talking about, right? Just like create a wealth cap. Like, why this idea that someone can just earn an infinite amount of wealth is dumb. Like, it is. Like, the more you think about it, the dumber it gets. And the only thing that they can say is like, oh, you want to punish success? It's like, yes, I would like to punish people who are successfully extracting wealth from the society. Yeah. Pierre Poilievre's voice sounds a bit like young Dan Aykroyd's. You're right. You're fucking right, dude. Young Dan here he is. Let's see if we can find a clip. Come on, YouTube. Dan Aykroyd.
We deal with ESP and ghosts and apparitions and all of this stuff that many
he even kind of looks like him a little
believe
bit
in at all.
He even kind of looks like him a little bit, dude. That's a hilarious observation, bud. Pierre Poilievre.
Just because the Prime Minister dressed up in racist costume.
But in fact, there is a group in New York.
Poilievre's a little bit more nasal. A little bit more on the nasally side of things. A little bit more like this, right?
Has to do with my pitch for the American Society for Psychical Research. Now, in the movie Ghostbusters, we deal with...
Right? So there's that, and then...
So many times...
A little bit more nasally. A little bit more on the nasally side of things.
Is a racist. Just because the Prime Minister had tried to help...
Hilarious observation, though, bud. Hilarious observation. I love that. I love that. That begins with the commodification of goods. As long as the exchange value is a primary function, most items money is required. The only things transferred to use value only. To me, you're ruddering right up against it, Loaf. In my perspective, that it's not about. Well, it is about the commodification of goods. You're right about that, but it's about the decommodification of people. That we are commodities in this market. We are expected to sell ourselves to a labor market as a commodity. And that's explicitly stated. Even Adam Smith stated that clearly, right? Like, that's non-controversial, right? But we don't talk about it. And we're not supposed to talk about the reality that we are not interacting with our society as citizens or as humans, but as commodities, right? That humans themselves are commodities. And so what we are, and what I have always attempted to move towards, is the decommodification of the human. That the human doesn't need to sell himself or herself. That the human being is guaranteed a position in the society as a citizen first, right? And then can move and interact with the society from that position. But that's not the position that exists for the society, right? That a human being is bought and sold, right? And there's a minimum wage, for God's sakes, right? There's a minimum wage, for God's sakes, right? So we know the value of how much you can purchase a human being for. And that's because human beings in our society are commodities. They're not humans. They're not people. They're not citizens. They're commodities. And so that should be our goal, is the decommodification of humanity. And once that happens, you'll find that will begin to extend into other things and other categories. But I don't think you can start with the decommodification of like oranges or stuff like that before you decommodify people. Well, because unfortunately, not all people are born with equal skills, or like, I like to articulate, I think, what you're reaching for, Adgooch, by saying not everybody will bring something to the table that the capitalists, in their narrow view of what is useful, will want to pay for, right? That, like, if you are spawned into this reality and you are like the world's greatest dancer, like the greatest dancer that ever lived, right? Like, if that's who you are, too bad. The capitalists don't give a fuck about you. Like, maybe you can go shake your booty in some fucking rap videos or something, right? But like, your skill set is not going to be rewarded by a capitalist system that expressly rejects or doesn't give a fuck about that at all, right? Like, you could be such a great dancer that you like change people's opinions on what it is to be a human being in the world, and the capitalist class won't reward you for it. They won't care at all. And this extends and extends and extends down the line, right? Like, you can be the world's greatest gardener, but you're never going to make as much money as like a corporate CEO does, right? Even though the gardener is infinitely more valuable, but not infinitely more valuable to the capitalist, right? Because all the capitalist wants is somebody to run their businesses for them so they don't have to do anything. That's constantly the goal of the capitalist class. How can I have everybody else do my work for me? Like, that's that, and the great irony is that it's the capitalists that say, I'll just get a job, when they don't work. Like, a capitalist does no work. Like, they don't care. Like, they barely need to pay attention to their businesses or anything like that, right? Are you kidding me? Like, if I had the kind of wealth that David Thompson had, my entire interaction with the business sector of my life would be just hiring people to do that work. That would be it. That's all I would do. I would just hire other people to do my work for me, right? Pay them $1 million. I have $50 billion. Like, who gives a fuck at all? Like, who gives a fuck at all? This is why I keep coming back. You were spot on, mate. Thank you, Adgooch. Thank you. A good opportunity to say, if you like this content, like, share, subscribe. I've got a Patreon down below. If you're donating at $1, think about kicking it up a couple of bucks, right? Even $2 helps. If you aren't donating, think about donating. We have to be supporting leftist voices. The leftists do not have a voice at the table, and it's gotten dangerous. In my perspective, the fact that there is nobody sitting at the table saying we can solve these problems, right? That we're listening to this whinging, whining neoliberal component that is saying, like, well, it's got to be tax incentivizations. Well, it's got to be it's let the market decide, right? It's got to be all of this kind of nonsense. And there's literally no one sitting at the table being like, you want to solve this problem? Solve it. And won't that do this? Yes. And that's the end of that conversation. And there's nobody in the conversation that's willing to talk that way. And the reason why there's nobody at the table talking that way is because they get destroyed by the capitalist class. So please consider actually putting your money where your mouth is. Support me. If you don't think money is valuable, then just give it away, right? Give it to me. I hope one day to stop having the money conversation. I hope that starts to happen for me. Because I hate it. I hate it more than anything. Like I don't like the money conversation. I don't like the capitalism part of this, but such is the reality. I tried to spam you on Russell Brand comments. It got you more views. I'll do it again. Fantastic, bud. Spread me around. Anytime I go on Twitter, I see people that are spreading me around, and I'm so grateful. I'm so grateful for it because I suck at Twitter. I'm like the worst on Twitter. I literally just can't spend any time. And I'm just happy that, honestly, like I'm constantly blown away and constantly happy that you guys even come in and talk to me, man. Like I'm so happy that, and it's always been the case. It's always been the case. I've never had that experience where I've closed down this show and there's been nobody. And I'm so grateful for that. And I'm so grateful for people who show up. I'm so grateful when people spread my stuff around, because for a lot of my life, I felt like I was isolated and alone. I felt like I was isolated and alone, that my ideas were just mine and everyone would just be like, oh, that's crazy, right? Oh, John. I got a lot of that. Oh, John, right? I got a lot of that. And since Donald Trump's election, it's a little bit less, oh, John, and more a bit like, oh, hey, John, right? And starting to kind of pull up from it. And a big part of the reason why I want to do this channel is because I know if I feel like I'm isolated, if I feel like I'm separated from the society, if I feel that way, then there are a lot of people that feel that way. And so I wanted to create this channel so that the people who feel that way can find solidarity with one another and realize that, oh, I'm not isolated. I'm not crazy. I'm not, these ideas are not ridiculous. That there are lots of people out there who are feeling that way. And so if you would like to support this, please, my Patreon is in the description. That would be very, very wonderful. And as I'm talking about this, I'm really realizing, like, one of the it's kind of I don't know how I feel about it. I feel kind of sad, actually. Like, I haven't seen Ruth around in a long time. You know, Ruth was a person who was around since like the beginning, and I just haven't seen her around in a while now. And so I guess I'll just take this little opportunity to just be like, Ruth, if you're out there, I hope you're doing well. I think about you from time to time. And I hope things are working out for you. Oh, God, and like Ruth is, now that I think about it, she's not in Ottawa. She's around there. Yeah, hope you're safe, hope you're well, Ruth. Hope you're doing good. Sending that energy out there. To you too, Bubble Guppy. Wherever you are, bud. These daily briefings are how I begin my workday. Would really miss if you were here, if you were not here. Thanks, bud. I appreciate that. I really do. Like, I'm trying to make something that's entertaining and interesting and trying to make something that people can relate to. Honestly, like, a big part of it too is just like trying to make sense of it all, right? Like, a lot of it is just like fucking nonsense at this point. And so trying to make sense of it. And I think the great successes that I have on this show are when I'm able to make sense of something that doesn't seem to make sense. And it does happen. Well, you're not alone, mate. Millions would feel the same way if I could peel them away from their propaganda screens. Yeah, I mean, and a lot of it is just people don't know who to trust anymore. Like, people don't know where to go. People don't know what to look at. People don't know what to talk about or anything. And so hopefully I'm able to add a little bit of sense to it, right? We've already talked about that. Conservative Party abandons another veteran. That's from the Beaverton. That's hilarious. We already know the convoy situation. Convoy protester hope to garner national sympathy by terrorizing locals. Right? Hilarious. Thanks, Dan. I don't know if I said hi to you, Dan. Good to see you, bud. Oh yes, this is actually really important news. I'm happy I actually got to this, because Amnesty International has joined rights groups in accusing Israel of apartheid against Palestinians. Now, let me put a little disclaimer on this. Amnesty International was absolutely crucial in spreading around the misinformation and the lies surrounding Iran on the lead up to the Iran-Contra scandal. So Amnesty International is one of those organizations that I always take with a bit of a grain of salt. But here they are, as an international organization, joining other rights groups in accusing Israel of apartheid against Palestinians. The response from this has been silence. I have already seen lots of censorship on Reddit over this. One of the great things about subscribing to many different channels in many different ways and seeing many different people communicate about many different things is that everybody likes to point out everybody else's censorship. It's fun for them, I think. But you're seeing this story get pulled off like World News, which is like the biggest news subreddit on Reddit. And if they're pulling this down from World News, that is very clearly a censorship campaign. People do not want, powerful people do not want it to become commonly understood that Amnesty International is accusing Israel of apartheid against Palestinians, right? If there is a turning tide against the United States, it's for sure happening. That the United States withdrew from Afghanistan, and that kind of began the whole thing. And now you're getting a narrative coming out of Ukraine. Like the United States is going to look like it's running away with its tail between its legs in Ukraine. Like that's really what it's going to look like. You can't heighten all of this rhetoric and then back off from the like. I keep saying it over and over again, man. Like the United States is not making plans. Like they don't actually think about the world in a way that makes sense. Right? They think about the world in a very like bullish, bullying kind of way. And they don't recognize that like, yeah, if we like heighten all of this and escalate and make it like they're saying like Russia's going to invade imminently and then they steadily need to pull back on that and then they're going to withdraw from Ukraine, allow Ukraine to rebuild its own independence, actually elect its own people, do all that kind of stuff. Like they're going to look like assholes, right? And it's going to extend into this kind of stuff. And this is where it gets actually really dangerous for the United States, okay? Like, withdrawing from Ukraine, not a big deal for the United States. Like, that's not a checkmate move. Like, that's not like, oh, it's over, right? If they are forced to withdraw their support of Israel, if the United States is forced to withdraw its support of Israel and actually move forward and to try to resolve this apartheid thing, like, that's a huge blow. Israel is their king in the conversation. Like if you look at the board as a chess board, well, Israel is not their king. Obviously, they are the king, but it's their queen. It's a massive piece. It's a massive piece, and the United States' support for Israel during this period of apartheid has created for them enormous amounts of enemies. Right, like. Basically throughout the Middle East, like the whole, like the Muslim Brotherhood, the Taliban, Al-Qaeda, Hezbollah, like all of these groups that the United States has constantly thrusted in our face in order to demonize. Well, amongst that group, complaint number 1 or 2 is, hey, the genocide against the Palestinians. Like it's put a lot of fire, a lot of fuel on that fire, and the tide is turning against the United States on this. And will the people of the United States start voting along these lines? Will they start actually demanding something be done about this? That's what they want to avoid. Because if they're forced into a position where they need to withdraw their support of Israel, right? Can you imagine? Like, I think Israel gets destroyed within the year, frankly. Like, it's been the source of hardship for lots of people in that region. And I don't want it to happen because I am against the destruction of countries. But should it happen, I'll be like, I mean, that's what goes down, bro. Like, that's what goes down. It's been like 40 years of like longer than that when it comes to the Palestinians. It's been like a long time, like a massive genocidal project. And the Greater Israel Project, which if I'm living in like Syria or Iraq or Egypt, I know all about the Greater Israel Project. Like, if you guys don't know about the Greater Israel Project, there's a couple of different maps, but like you can basically grab any of them and they're about right. But like, this is the goal, right? This is the goal. You can see a section of Iraq gets peeled off. Syria, like, why do you think they're blowing Syria up, right? A big section of Saudi Arabia. Of course, they want to take over the Suez Canal, so a section of Egypt, right? And they just expand all of this and create Greater Israel, which is essentially a United States surrogate state, right? And like, a story like this can really undercut this. Can really, really undercut this. And this is the goal for them, right? Is to expand their influence. I don't even understand why they feel they need to divide Iraq. Like, just, Iraq is destroyed. Take it over. Anyway. But like Lebanon, like, get fucked Lebanon, I guess, right? Like, but what they're finding, like what the United States is finding, is that it's not so easy to do that, right? And it just goes to show you how arrogant these Westerners are, how arrogant the United States actually is. Like, they literally think they can pull out a crayon and just like draw the border and be like, done. How do you govern this? How do you govern this? Right? Like, the people of Saudi Arabia are not the people of Syria, are not the people of Egypt, are not the people of Lebanon, are not the people of Iraq. Right? How do you govern this? Right? And the true answer is you don't. Like, you don't. Right? You can't just arbitrarily redraw lines like this and expect it all to be smooth. Right? You literally can't. And this kind of thing is going to blow up in the face of the United States. It's going to blow up in big ways. And like, the world is turning against the United States for its overt and obvious genocide, or apartheid if you prefer. Loaf, you're saying, I enjoy the atmosphere here. I've taken the occasional break when I've been particularly annoyed by chats or arguments where I really disagree. But I try not to let the occasional annoyance hurt solidarity. Yeah, bud, that's the secret. That's the secret, right? Like, I never know when I'm going to stumble into the weeds with someone, right? And some people are really thin-skinned, and some people's breaking point is weird, right? Like, I've had people like blow out of this place because I didn't agree with their like internet boyfriend or whatever, and I'm like, I don't give a fuck about that. Like, I don't know why you give a fuck about that. It's weird, but I don't try to actively alienate people. I think that's really what it comes down to. I don't try to actively alienate people. And what you're saying as well, I think when it comes to, there are some people who blow in here who are obviously on the right, and I think are arguing from a position of bad faith. And so I want to start including you guys in the process of deciding what to do with such people. You know what I mean? Like, I want to start using the poll function a little bit more to be like, hey, should we ban this person? What do you guys think? Because I know that like, me engaging with those kinds of people annoys some of the people in the chat. And so I want to try to get a little bit more inclusionary in how we move forward with this stuff. Because frankly, there's some of you guys have been here for months and months and months. Like, some of you guys are, I'm really hoping that when I get to 1,000 subscribers, I get a whole new tool set. Because some of you guys, I'm literally just like, yeah, you should be able to, whatever you say should be like highlighted and like Loaf, I think you're exactly like that. Like, whatever you say should be highlighted and you should be able to take prominence, especially if the chat starts to get more unwieldy, which I suspect it will. Anyway, this is all like theory crafting and shit, guys. So, yeah, I've been thinking about it, Seraphim. I gotta tell you, if anybody's uppity in this fucking chat, it's this guy, this Seraphim. No, bud. You're great. If I was an innocent person in Iraq and my children were killed in some lie about weapons, I would become hostile. Yeah, the difference is I would take it out on those responsible. Yeah. Tacos for Jesus, I hope you dual stream on Twitch soon. Dude, that's something that I have been like contemplating. I even downloaded the software for it and like started moving forward. You know what happened is I started to get really overwhelmed by the toolkit and by the tool set. And I just need to get over that, I think. I think I just need to get over that sense of being overwhelmed and just like push forward, make mistakes, allow those mistakes to exist, and just keep moving forward on it and not worry so much about it. You're right, though. I should start dual streaming on Twitch. You're right. And I it's something that I've been like intending to do, but I just feel like I get overwhelmed. I get overwhelmed. Like I'm a person too, and I got to where am on YouTube, and I feel like okay with that, and like all of that's, but then to like do a dual stream with also Twitch, and like, and should does that mean I need to have like a Twitch stream or a Twitch Twitch chat as well, right? Hassan has created a community you can siphon off of. Yeah, maybe. Again, dude, like, you're starting to get into a position where I feel very overwhelmed by this conversation. Like it feels very overwhelming to me that like the just like the growing and the going and multi-streaming and multi-platforming and doing all this kind of stuff. Like I don't know why. I don't know why necessarily. It just does feel I just feel overwhelmed by it. All right, you guys are pushing on it, so I'm going to put some energy in it. And I'm done with my other project, so maybe I can start focusing some energy on that project. And I tried to experiment with it, and it was kind of working, or it wasn't kind of working, and so I just kind of abandoned it. But maybe I'll go back to it. I'll go back to it. Thanks for the support on that, guys. Thanks, and be prepared for some really wonky streams because of it, though. Be prepared for that. Curious if you have any recommended reading in general. I mean, can you narrow that? Because I mean, the Communist Manifesto is must read. Das Kapital, of course, but that's thick. The Wealth of Nations, Adam Smith, is absolutely crucial. Like it's the stuff that like you think you should read, honestly. Like the writings of Stalin, the writings of Trotsky. In the vein of the manifesto, I mean, focus on the stuff that's written by the people who are actually attempting to build on that, like Mao's writings, and like, and it's all good, right? Even when you disagree, it's still good, right? Like it's and a lot of that stuff. I recommend going onto Socialism for All's channel. There's a fellow by the name Socialism for All. He does a lot of audiobook versions of this stuff. Go through his stuff. Like it's really, really good. Yeah. Socialism, Utopia, and Scientific by Engels. Exactly, yeah. Anything Frantz Fanon is an important read. Joining the UN. Black Skin, White Masks. In Black Skin, White Mask, Fanon psychoanalyzed the oppressed black person who is perceived to be a lesser creature in the white world they live in, and studies how they navigate the world through a performance of whiteness. Yes, and there's been this idea has... I'm starting to see more films. What was the name of that film where... a black man takes a job at a call center, and and Danny Glover is in it, and they have a very like frank conversation about creating a white voice, right? And to be perceived as more white over the phone, because that idea, and I actually make the argument not to detract from this, because I think that, sorry to bother you, thank you, Dan Boxes. I think that this is completely true and completely accurate, and I don't want to co-opt it or try to like seize it for myself. But I also feel like this issue of performing, right, of going through a performance of whiteness, is also done by white people in corporate settings. That, like, Starbucks workers, for example, right? They're going through a performance of, I mean, and you could call it whiteness, right? That there is like a mask that needs to be presented. But even white people have to use that mask, right? That there is a colonizing mask, or a colonizer's mask, and colonizing language. That this problem, this occurrence, which Fanon is completely accurate on, is something that also exists within white culture. And I'm trying to tread very carefully on this, because I don't want to be perceived as trying to co-opt, or what's the word? There's a word for what I'm trying to avoid, which is but this analysis, I think, can extend into the wider culture as well. That while black people are put into a position where they're performing whiteness in order to make it in, I myself have done, and I have seen people and have had discussions amongst white people about this very phenomenon. And we've always articulated it as like a corporate thing, that like that we have to pretend to be corporate, right? But I think that there's a link there, that it's kind of the same thing, that we have to appropriate. That's exactly what it is, Harry. I don't want to be perceived as appropriating this, because I think that what Fanon is pointing out is absolutely the case, and is absolutely true. And Wretched of the Earth, yeah, very good. And so, and this flows into sort of a larger point that I always talk about, which is that poor white people and poor black people, if they could get through the racial divide and join hands with one another, that would be an incredibly powerful alliance. That would scare the shit out of the corporate state, out of the death cult, in huge, huge ways. In huge, huge ways. And I think a lot of it, like, we all have to wear masks. See, I can even hear it in the way I'm talking about it, and it drives me crazy. It's like, not, like, all lives matter, right? Like, so everybody wears masks. Like, yeah, so you know what I'm going to do, guys? I think you know what I'm trying to say. I'm going to stop, because I worry that I'm just sitting here digging the hole. Yeah. And that's what makes it so difficult to actually talk about this stuff, because I'm so sympathetic to authors and writers like this who are making this kind of point. And all I want to do is say that, like, I feel this. Like, I feel this. Not in the same way, obviously, like black people with the history of segregation, with the history of slavery, with the history of all this, who have to fake being a certain type of person in order to make it through a white-dominated world. It has similar echoes in how I feel about white people attempting to navigate corporate structures. That you're creating a false image or a mask, a fake person, right? And that the issue ultimately, in my view, is capitalism itself. That capitalism does this to everybody and dismantles a person's. They don't want real people, because a person who does not take the time or the effort or has the capability to actually self-analyze and be a real person existing in the world means that they can be used as a commodity. And I hope I successfully navigated these waters without sounding like a total fucking asshole. Because I'm not trying to be on this particular point. Anyway. Yes, a good one. Oh, you know what, dude? I completely, in terms of reading, can I tell you, if you wanted to have good reading that is not specifically, that's the Ewoks Unhinged. How you doing, bud? Glad you popped in. Look at this guy, Ewoks Unhinged. Everybody go subscribe to Ewoks Unhinged. This guy's been doing what I've been doing for a while, and I feel like we're both kind of coming up at the same time. You got more subscribers than I do, Ewoks, right now, you son of a bitch. If you want some good writing that's not specifically capitalist, or specifically communist, but is critical of capitalist culture, then find Chris Hedges. Chris Hedges' work, The Death of the Liberal Class, War is a Force That Gives Us Meaning. These are seminal books. War is a Force That Gives Us Meaning is probably one of the most powerful books written on the subject of war. And I really strongly recommend the works of Chris Hedges, for sure. Yeah, being a colonized person basically means being forced into the capitalist system through an oppressor nation, so I get what you're saying 100%. Oh, that's good. See, Ewoks, it's nice. I feel like, dude, we got to collaborate. You and me. We got to put something together. Like when we talk about leftist unity, I feel like it's us. Like I really do. Like I feel like I don't like, where are the Canadian leftists? Right? And you do better with guests and shit though. Like this channel is basically just me talking. You do a lot better with guests, though. Anytime I tune into your shit, there's like 3 screens and there's a bunch of people, and I'm just like, wow, like that seems exhausting to me. Because I have tried to get guests on the show before, and I have done guests, and it's fucking exhausting to me to organize that shit. I'm very much like a lone wolf. I'm a lone wolf out in the wilderness. Anyway, bud, I'm just happy you're here, honestly, man. That feels nice. Feels nice. I have a very heavy Nova Scotia accent, and when I worked in Chicago, there was a lot of pressure to sound more American. Yeah, of course, right? Of course, they want you to get on board. And the only way to combat that is to just sound even more Nova Scotian, right? Is to just be like, oh yeah, fuck bud. You know, and then that's who you are, right? That's just what happens. Oh, W.E.B. Du Bois, yeah, is another good read. We could just sit here and talk about all the good shit, right? Like, oh my God, come on, 18th century writer, the poet was writing about. I mean, Charles Dickens is great. Charles Dickens' works is really good if you want like a really insider perspective. Like really think about A Christmas Carol. A Christmas Carol is like about as anti-capitalist as you can get. Literally talking about like child slavery and shit. Come on, what's the name of that poet though? The Infernal Machines of Capitalism. He was talking about how the factories and he wrote about the process of taking the serfs. No, not Oscar Wilde. The serfs and putting them into the factories. Oh, this is gonna really, 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 really bother me. Industrial era poet. No, not Dickens. Come on, is it Warren? No. Let me just see what I can get. It's gonna kill William Blake. William Blake's really great. There's a reason why nobody reads Blake anymore. There's a reason why Blake isn't taught. Because William Blake is William Blake chimney. When my mother died, I was very young, and my father sold me while yet my tongue could scarcely cry, weep, 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 weep. So your chimneys I sweep, and in soot I sleep. There's little Tom Dacre, who cried when his head, that curled like a lamb's back, was shaved, so I said, "Hush, Tom, never mind it, for when your head's bare, you know that the soot cannot spoil your white hair." And so he was quiet, and that very night, as Tom was a-sleeping, he had such a sight, that thousands of sweepers, Dick, Joe, Ned, and Jack, were all of them locked up in coffins of black. And by came an angel who had a bright key, and he opened the coffins and set them all free. Then down a green plain, leaping, laughing, they run, and wash in a river, and shine in the sun. Then naked and white, all their bags left behind, they rise upon clouds and sport in the wind. And the angel told Tom if he'd be a good boy, he'd have God for his father, and never want joy. And so Tom awoke, and we rose in the dark, and got with our bags and our brushes to work. Though the morning was cold, Tom was happy and warm. So if all do their duty, they need not fear harm. Like literally poems about child slavery, like child serfdom, like this kind of shit. Like William Blake's, come on now. The Infernal Machines is what he's most well known for. Machine. I can't remember. Maybe I'm misremembering an infernal poem. Anyway. I feel like I could do this all night. I'll move on. William Blake is Johnny Depp's character in Dead Man. Yeah, exactly. Dead Man was an interesting one, eh? What a weird one. Talcott Parsons for a medical sociology perspective on capitalism. Oscar Wilde's The Soul of Man Under Socialism is good. It's a bit too authoritarianism is bad, which makes sense, given who Oscar Wilde is. But for my taste, he has some really beautiful anti-capitalist phrasing. Of course he does. Oscar Wilde, man. Oscar Wilde's a bomb. Emanuel Wallerstein is an excellent economic socialist. Now we're just going to list, like, literally every author. Oh, and don't forget to read the Bible. Yeah, don't forget about the Tao, right? Don't forget about the Vedas, right? Don't forget about that. Don't forget about what am I missing? What am I missing? Oh, the Quran, right? Don't forget about the Quran, right? That's a good one. I actually got to tell you guys, if it came down to which book, like the Bible versus the Quran, in terms of like its readability and its prose, the Quran has got it on the Bible, man. Like it's a much more like poetic book. The Bible has a lot of like just straight up like it's a history book kind of reading. So it's not really great for reading. The Quran is written in such a way so that like it's, and you can really tell that like somebody would actually say it and that there's like a musicality to the language. You can really tell. The Very Hungry Caterpillar, crucial reading. May I recommend Dianetics by L. Ron Hubbard? Dianetics is so dumb, dude. It's so fucking dumb. Like, you don't need to read it very far to be like, oh my god. Might as well read the Bible. Lord knows. Yeah, Judeo-Christians don't. That's the reason you should read the Bible, in my opinion. Right? Yeah, and Islam is more compatible with communism than any other religion, in my opinion. I think you're right. Maybe not like more, but it definitely is like, it's got a compatibility for sure. And there's a reason why, like, Middle Eastern countries, there's been communist movements that have existed in Middle Eastern countries because it doesn't, there's no offense. And, like, Islam itself professes to be an extension of Christianity, right? That's why it's part of that Abrahamic religion umbrella, right? That this battle that's going on between Christianity and Islam, I think mainly comes from the Christians. Like, I think if it was up to the Muslims, if it was up to the Islamic states, they would be much more peaceable, right? I think there would be much more communication and trade. I think trade is a big part of it. As far as Abrahamic religions go. Oh, yeah. No. You're right on that one, for sure. For sure. I mean, especially given the amount of propaganda. Like, I mean, it's so annoying because Christ himself is like... And the early Christians were communists. Like, they were putting together communes that, like they were organizing along the principles of, like, to every person for their need and for every person to their equality. I'm butchering that, but you guys know what I'm talking about. Like, and for example, is all about altruism. Yeah. No, don't get me wrong. Like, Islam is, and the Quran itself is I would, like, my only regret about reading the Quran is, like, I can't read it in its original language, and I can't hear it in its original language because I don't know the language. But you can really tell that as you're reading it, even in its translated form, it's like there's something there. There's something really, like, it was designed to be an art piece above all else. That really was part of, like, again, I'll use the word musicality, right? There's like, you can see how someone would be reciting the Quran in front of you, and it would be part of, like, a larger musical, poetic kind of proceeding. You know, I just know that it's closer to art than the Bible is, for sure. A friend of mine who is Muslim told me the Quran has something called the literary device miracle. Basically, Quran verses are written so complex and smooth, it's as if no man could have created it. Yeah, I mean, like, that's the mythology surrounding it. It's, it just shows you, though, how, like, because it was written, that there is such a thing as a genius. Like, that I think is something that we need to accept. That there is such a thing as a person who produces something that is a work of genius, right? Look into Sufism. It's a smaller sect of Islam. I know a little bit about Sufism, not a ton about Sufism. Of course, the person named Islam is going to be talking about Islam. Mystical Islamic belief and practice in which Muslims seek to find the truth of divine love and knowledge through direct personal experience with God. The Sufis are known as the poor, plural of, well, and so much of the Abrahamic religious shifting is trying to get this into this position where it's understood that a single person can connect to the larger energy. You don't need a go-between, right? Like, so much of Christianity, of Judaism, and Islam also struggles with this, is this idea that, like, we don't need an intercessory or intercessory, right? Like, we don't need the Pope. We don't need a priest, right? You can connect to the larger energy just because you are of it. You are it, and it is of you. And that's part of the narrative of Christ being both a man and God, right? Which modern day Christians don't really focus on or pay attention to very much. But it's this attempt to state, because if Christ is God, then why aren't you? Right? Like, that's the question, right? That if we can accept that here is a man and this man is of God, then why isn't every person of God? And the answer is that we are. And we don't need a priest or a pope or a nun or somebody to be an intercessory for us. We just don't need that. Right? That these are power structures that are shaky in their legitimacy. Islam is a common Bengali last name, so we have more Muslims than most Arab countries. Oh yeah, fascinating. That's wonderful, dude. I mean, I guess I know people named Christian, so... You know, every time I read Marx, I get another insight from whatever the work is. I have the full Opium of the People quote in front of me right now. Nice. Well, and Marx is in terms of his views on religion, is not well understood, right? Like, the Opium of the People quote is used a lot to try to forward this idea that Marx is like anti-religion, and that's not accurate. It's not actually accurate. Like I think a full view of the way Marx viewed religion is that he saw religion as a way for people to escape the denigration of their material conditions, and that if we actually improved the material conditions of the populace, that a lot of religious expression would fade away. That people would not cling to these organizations or these institutions with such fervor because their material conditions would be met, right? And so it's not like people take it as if communists are like, religion's bad, get rid of religion, when in reality I think the critique is more like, the only reason these religious organizations exist in the first place is because the material conditions of the populace haven't been met. And if the material conditions of the populace is met, then these organizations would probably cease to exist, right, over time. Or they would ooh, an atheist. Ooh, an atheist. So Islam, here I have a legitimate question for you. Okay, you acknowledge that we live in a quantum energy, right? That we live in like a singular energy, right? This is what the quantum mechanicists are saying. Like, let's start there. Do you think so? Are you on board with that idea? And if you don't want to answer these questions, then don't. Tell me to fuck off. Yeah. Do you think that energy is alive? I think that's a fascinating question. Like, do you think it has its own kind of consciousness? Do you think it has its own modus operandi? Hey, if you love it so much, why don't you marry it? There's the quality commentation that you guys are here for. Oh, if you love it so much, why don't you marry it? Perfect. I'm a professional. This state and this society produce religion, which is an inverted consciousness of the world because they are in an inverted world. This ties back to his understanding that Hegel was backward, yeah? Wish I could believe in any religion. Unfortunately, I don't. Makes life and death so much more scary. I actually envy people who do. Yeah, life is energy, right? But like the question, what I think is interesting to contemplate or to dwell on, is that energy itself a sentient being? To what degree do we think that the energy, that the force that sustains life itself has its own consciousness? Because my position is that it has to be as sentient as I am. That if I consider myself sentient, then the energy that is me, that sustains me, and that creates me is also sentient to the degree that I am sentient, right? And if all things are made with this singular energy, then it should be as sentient as we all are, right? I think that's this conversation that we're having is the reason why I can't call myself an atheist ultimately, because I've always had this kind of view that, like, I understand where the atheists are coming from, especially with their ridiculousness. Yeah, fuck you, Joel Osteen. Dick. Protestant work ethic is another way to understand religion. It often is a tool of capitalism. Yeah. No, it is a tool of capitalism, because capitalism is the ideology, right? Christianity has become the veneer, right? Christianity is just the veneer. But, like, Joel Osteen is just a capitalist, right? Just a capitalist. And I grew up surrounded by people who were struggling with, like, it's not a duality existence within capitalism. There's a Venn diagram, right? And I was growing up around people who were struggling constantly with how to be a good Christian, how to be a good person, and how to be a good capitalist. And you can only be two of the three, right? You can never be a good Christian capitalist person. These three antagonizing forces, right? You can be a good Christian person, You can be a good capitalist person. You can be a good Christian capitalist. But you can't be a good Christian capitalist person. It just doesn't exist. And so I suppose it's not a Venn diagram. Anyway. And it's this sort of antagonism, which is yet another antagonism that exists within capitalism, that means that people like Joel Osteen are an inevitability, right? Because Joel Osteen just uses the veneer of Christianity, but in the end, he's just a capitalist. I don't want to avoid what you're saying here, Love. Marx basically said Hegel's dialectic started from ideal and moved to material. Bourgeoisie religion tends to do the same, as opposed to moving from material to the ideal. Yeah. And I mean, I've said it over and over again that capitalism, religious organizations that exist within capitalism have to be fraudulent by default, right? They can't abide by their own scriptures by default, right? Because they all benefit from the system of poverty, the system of wealth extraction, right? The system is as clean as this. There are a bunch of poor people, right? Why are there a bunch of poor people? Because we keep voting to keep all of these people poor, right? That includes the churches. That the churches support the political system that impoverishes people. The churches then preach a message of poverty alleviation to get the, lefty liberal types to actually donate money to them. And then they take a small sliver of that and have like a potluck on Thursdays or whatever, right? And then they keep the rest for themselves. That's the grift that every religious organization is running. Like, if they didn't run that grift, they would cease to exist. So even if they're nice, even if they're like a pastor or a priest or an imam or whoever, who's like really nice and really trying, well, the structure of the system is maintain the system of poverty alleviation, exploit the poor in order to get money from the wealthy, pander, like do some pandering thing to the poor to pretend like you're trying to alleviate their suffering. And maybe you are. And maybe you are. But then you're keeping the bulk of the wealth for yourself or for your institution, right? And if you don't run this grift, you can't succeed. It's very, very straightforward, right? And in this way, religious organizations cease being religious organizations and they just become another edifice of capital. As long as time is infinite, whatever happened to bring us here will eventually happen again. Hence, déjà vu. Time is an interesting one to talk about. Does time even exist? Right? Even amongst the physicists, even amongst the quantum mechanicists, there's a big debate about whether or not time exists. That we measure time because there seems to be an entropy that is consistent to a certain degree. But you know the disease where someone is born and then they age rapidly, right? And we've called that a disease. Well, couldn't that just be also explained by a person who is out of sync with time? That they just experience time more quickly, and so they age more rapidly, right? Like, I think about this all the time, right? Is time actually consistent? Does time even exist? How does time work? What is time? Or is time just another thing that we have erected as a species in order to try to make sense of the world that we live in, when in reality, it doesn't actually exist? Is time just another god? Is time just another thing that we have, like, well, we rotate around the Earth by a consistent kind of stuff, and is it another? And yes, this is another. Time and space are the same. Like and so there's all of this conversation surrounding the concept of time that is very fascinating, and it really pays not to be a fundamentalist in this conversation, or that's what they want you to think. Boom, boom, boom. I mean, it's beneficial for capitalists to pretend like time exists so that they can measure it and meter it, right? Time exists, right? So get up at 8 o'clock. Here's an alarm clock. It goes off at 8 o'clock. Get to work by 9, right? The only logic is whatever happened will happen again on a long enough time scale, and time is infinite. So this exact conversation will happen again, and also in different outcomes. I mean, I need more weed for this. I appreciate that. Generation Y me, I don't think I've seen you around here, bud. Good to see you. Glad to see you, man. Yeah, smoke up, bud. Smoke up. I don't always get into the religious side of the conversation, but when it reveals itself, I love to dive in, because I'm like, my background is that I was an evangelical fundamentalist Christian. I was raised in the Alliance churches, which is the same churches that Stephen Harper is still a part of. I have since, of course, rejected those churches and rejected that mindset. And I've come to see that the trouble is fundamentalism. And so I try very hard. There are very, 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 very few issues that I am a fundamentalist on. And those issues are, ironically, I'm a fundamentalist on the issue you shouldn't be a fundamentalist. And also, but also, everyone should have food and shelter. That should be a guarantee by the society. I fundamentally believe that that's the truth. And I don't think anybody can talk me off of that point. What if the universe is crunched back down and explodes out, and we've already had this conversation an infinite number of times already? Sounds exhausting. Sounds exhausting. That, I think that, okay. I'm going to dive into like my whole thing, because I love talking about this. So, even the atheist philosophers, right? Even the atheist philosophers say that, well, there had to have been a first mover. Like, why is there something instead of nothing? That's the big question, right? Why is there anything? Why is there something instead of nothing? And so even the atheist philosophers are like, okay, well, there had to have been like a first moment, like a first shift over, right? And I've dwelled on that for quite some time, and I've thought to myself, okay, well, like, what happens when a creature is born, when a creature is spawned into reality? Well, the first question that any creature that is spawned, or any force or whatever that is created, attempts to discover is, what are they capable of doing? Right? It's not what is my purpose, or what is this place, or what how do I fit in, or any of that. Right? Like, what is my meaning? That comes quite later, in fact. The first question, and it's intrinsic. It's not like they ask it and then answer it. It just is something they pursue. What am I capable of doing? Well, if you're the force of creation, right? If you're the force of creation that's capable of creating all things that are logically possible to be created, then you do it. And you don't think about doing it, you just do it. Right? So you create all things that are logically capable to be created, because that's within your power. Right? You don't think about it, you just do it. And it's only after these things are created that you can turn around and begin asking questions of it. Don't you ever get the feeling you've done your life already? No. And what this means to me is that, like, I actually stand in opposition with the ancient Christian theists, including people like Isaac Newton and Augustus, because they have this idea that God is all-knowing. I'm more or less of the opinion that God's trying to figure it out like we are. That we are the process of God trying to figure itself out. Or the force of energy, if you prefer, trying to figure itself out. That we are that. And it only knows as much as we do. Right? and this is why I say, like, you're a quantum being, right? Walking around in quantum energy, right? Because you are. And you are an aspect of the larger whole. And when I talk to you and when you talk to me, we are aspects of the larger quantum energy talking to one another. And so in that way, we are actually truly equal to one another. We're not equal in terms of capability, which is what the right wing tries to pretend we're talking about when we're talking about equality. We're equal in validity. We are equal in validity because everyone's experience is born, exist, die. That's it. And the concept of capability or usefulness is a very narrow view and a very narrow way of looking at things. Yeah, Bill Hicks did talk about this. You're right. And I've heard people like Jimmy Dore talk this way, right? Like this is not a unique position I'm taking for sure. But I think there's something to it. Because I think that it is this understanding of our position in reality that breeds equality, that breeds inclusivity, that breeds humility, that we really do understand that when we talk to one another, we are talking to equals in the truest sense of the word, that we are all peers with one another. And that can be quite humbling. That can be quite humbling, right? Like you can have conversations with people who, let's try to be nice, like who are diminished in their capability, right? Who are not all there, and having the realization that my existence is just as valid as theirs while you are in conversation with those people can be very humbling, right? Can be very humbling. But I think it's important. We are all apes. Exactly. Yeah, we are. That do you guys know about the stoned ape theory? That this was put forward by, I forget his name all of a sudden. Stoned ape theory. Yeah, McKenna. Terence McKenna put forward the idea of the stoned ape theory, right? Tried to prove God exists. He's omni-malvoyant, i.e. all hateful. No, things would be different if he was all hateful. I just think that, I think that the force that created all of us is capable of creating anything that's logically possible to be created, and it can't not. Like, it can't not. Like one of the things that everybody tries to peg on the idea of God is like, well, if he's all powerful and all benevolent and all this, well, why does something like the Holocaust exist? And the answer really is because it's logically possible to. And how would such a being even eliminate such an event, right? Even if it wanted to, even if it looked at the Holocaust and thought that's too much, we've got to get rid of that. Well, you're literally talking about deleting a memory from the creative force of God itself so that God itself forgets it, right? It can't be done. It can't logically be done. Even if it did it, it would turn around, see that there's something missing, and create it. And that would just happen like instantaneously. Like it, and once you kind of go down that rabbit hole, you kind of see that the creative force is kind of trapped in this too, right? Like I'm positive that there are things that the force of creation looks at and goes, this is unbearable. Too bad. That all such a force could actually do is attempt to create yes, you're quite right, Onward. You're quite right. That's the old evangelical part of me coming out. All such a force could actually do is attempt to create a consciousness within its own creation in order to continuously pass down the line the idea, don't do this again, right? You don't want to see any more Holocausts? Here's how you avoid it. And that's the best that we can do. She doesn't like it, yeah. Jack Miles in God, a Biography, presents a version of God capable of making mistakes, one who is so embarrassed by his treatment of Job that he blusters excuses and then never utters another word. Interesting. I don't think God would be particularly embarrassed by the treatment of Job, I gotta tell you. You just gotta read the book of Job to realize that, like, God is like, shut the fuck up. And that's, like, the end of the book. The Old Testament God is a lot more, like, get fucked. There's a lot more, like, get fucked statements that come out of God in and if you want to see like, it's the Old Testament God, like, those writers were not interested in trying to make this force look good. Not interested. Read Ezekiel. The God of Ezekiel is a fucking psycho. Like, a fucking psycho. Like, I'm blown away that people who are, like, anti-Christian or anti-Bible don't use Ezekiel. Like, the God in Ezekiel is a fucking psychopath. Like, the book starts by God inflicting himself on Ezekiel, binding himself to Ezekiel by the ankles and the wrists and by the neck, whispering in his ear, tell them this, tell them that, tell them this, right? Sending Ezekiel into town and looking around and being like, look at their disgusting ways. And their disgusting ways is literally like they're praying the wrong direction. Like, literally. The God of Ezekiel is a fucking psycho. And in my view is written to be that way. Like, and the statement, the ultimate statement of it is like, yeah, what are you going to do about it? It's God. What are you going to do about it? Then Jesus on the cross is an attempt to apologize for those shortcomings. It's God attempt to reconcile himself to humanity. Yes, that narrative there fits in pretty nicely to the kind of Christian narrative generally. That's why it's called the New Testament, right? There's a new deal that gets made between God and man. That instead of man being a plaything for God, that we're beginning to come into the consciousness that we are part of God and that we are of God, right? That begins through the figure of Christ. Whereas the Old Testament kind of way of looking at it is like, we are here, God is there. God tells us what to do, we say, yes, sir. Right? And there's the evolution of Christianity, the evolution of these religious things is fascinating to me. It's fascinating. And I want to talk about the stoned ape hypothesis because I actually disagree with this. I don't think that this is what happened, right? Because I think that what actually happens with humanity, like, how did we go from being apes to being where we are now? And the only key difference that I can see is that we have a vocal structure that allows us to create a multiplicity of sounds and to create more ideas and more combinations in the abstract space, right? That an ape could realize what calculus is, but it would have no tool set to be able to articulate that to his fellow apes, right? He doesn't have enough articulations to actually form enough and be understood within an abstract space. And we know that apes can go into the abstract space, right? And let me be clear what I mean when I say abstract space, right? It's a space that exists only in our imagination. And we can both exist within that abstract space. Things like improv, like Dungeons and Dragons, right? This is us creating abstract spaces for us to exist in. And humans merely have the ability to exist within that abstract space with more articulations than other creatures. That I can articulate, yeah, exactly. Ape's grimace, we smile. It's hard to see people the same once you see it. Well, and Coco the ape, right? We taught an ape sign language, right? And she would be able to articulate lots of things in sign language to us. right? And so these apes are not like they're not as dumb as we think, right? They're not as dumb as we think they are. It's just that, they don't have like a millennia of writing. They don't have like a millennia of building a culture of writing and a millennia of building a culture of myth and all of this kind of stuff that we just take for granted today, right? That we just take for granted today. And all of that is predicated on the idea that we can actually articulate a lot more, a lot of different things, right? Like, we have many different sounds that we can combine to create many different ideas and meanings, and we can create words that have deep, robust connections, and that other creatures don't have. They just don't have the capability to do it, right? Even if they wanted to set out to do it, they don't have the physical capability to do it. And I kind of take a look at the stoned ape hypothesis as kind of a cop-out. As kind of a just like, oh yeah, we just did mushrooms and that ascended us to a higher level of consciousness. I'm like, no, I think that the apes have the same level of consciousness that we do. I think that they are as sentient as we are. I just think that we have a different tool set that allows us to exist in the abstract space more robustly than they do. And it takes thousands and thousands and thousands and thousands and thousands of years to build the language and the culture and all of that kind of stuff up over time. What are you guys talking about? You're saying all kinds of fun stuff. Apes have recently entered the Stone Age. Yep, that has been observed, for sure. Hunting with sticks and rocks, yeah. Super cool. Super fucking cool. We got a real Planet of the Apes situation happening here. The transcendental realm, yeah, that's another way of saying it. That's a really fantasy-based way of saying it. The transcendental realm. Come, friend. Let us enter the transcendental realm together. I like it. I like it. I'm going to ask my old philosophy prof if I can share a paper he wrote. He's an atheist Jew and attempted to write a theodicy to help reconcile the Israel-Palestinian conflict. It's an interesting read. Oh, yeah, I would love that if you shared that, dude. Yeah, for sure. I get what you say about the creator being stuck in this as well, but whatever created the creator is surely infinite, as that could be the only logic for anything. Otherwise, nothing would have ever been. Yeah, now we're getting into spaces that I think exist outside of our capacity. Like that kind of idea. Like we don't really have an understanding of what nothing is, right? And we can't. Like we as human beings, we can't. Like, what is nothing, right? And in my view, it's completely possible. Like, if this is all things, well, surely there should be an inverse of it, and perhaps they're just flipping on one another, right? That it's a constant flipping of all things and all things that are not, and we can't even imagine that. Like, what is nothing? We don't have the language or the capacity to understand what nothing is. Not really. Like, not really. And in many ways, we're built to fear nothing, right? Like, we're built to be afraid of nothing. And so this is the struggle of this particular conversation, is that there's a limit. There's a limit to what we're capable of understanding, and you, Adguch, are stumbling in to what, or I shouldn't say stumbling in, but you're heading into those limits. And it's good to acknowledge them. It's good to acknowledge them. We can only go so far. Yeah, not stupid, just wired differently, yeah. But humans also lost some skills that we had with what we recently learned the past 100K years. Yeah, that absolutely happens, man. Gotta pop out, join the Patreon. Tonnage, bless your heart, bud. Bless your heart, for real. You put words into a lot of sentiments I've had for a while, but haven't necessarily been able to articulate clearly. Looking forward to future content. Tell your friends, tell your girlfriend, tell your wives. Thanks so much, Tonnage. I appreciate that, bud. I'll send you a link to the Discord, okay? And the Discord, lots of people are active on the Discord. I'm not nearly as active as I need to be on that Discord. I do look at it, guys. I do. I promise. I'm just the worst person alive. The sentient cloud in Futurama that talked to Bender. Yeah. Yes, you were doing well until everyone died. You do need to have infinite power or energy to even mimic a real universe. Yeah, of course. Absence of something. Yeah, thanks, Barnabas. You did it. Nothing or the unknown. Nothing or no thing is everything. Therefore, nothing equals everything. Checkmate, everyone. Yeah, you got it, bud. There's a philosophy paper I read, especially when I'm feeling bad, from Deleuze, and he talks about eminence as a life, and these conversations always remind me of it. Fantastic. Fantastic, bud. Fantastic. Oh, yeah, I love... Here, let's... I feel like the energy on the religious conversation is coming to a bit of a... So let's see if I could push into any other content. It's fun to kind of retrace and be like, yeah, this all started because we started talking about Israel and its apartheid against the Palestinians. Which, like, boy howdy, I hope I'm alive to see an end to that, right? And it's possible. I think that's something that we all have to say, right? There was an apartheid in South Africa that happened not that long ago. And it ended, right? It ended. It's possible that this comes to an end. It's possible that it comes to an end. We just need the Ottomans back. Oh, man, that's what the Americans are trying to prevent. They're trying to prevent the rise of the Ottoman Empire again. For sure. They don't want to see the rise of the Ottoman Empire again, right? And it's pretty likely that the Ottoman Empire will come back. It's pretty likely. It's still going because those behind the curtain want it. I mean, the Americans don't. I looked into a monkey's eyes at a Berlin zoo. We shared a connection. Yeah. Right? And this is what I'm talking about when I say, like, we all are equal in our validity. Right? We're all equal in our validity. And I think that, like, I'm hanging out with my dog, right? Like, my little dog runs around, and I look at him sometimes, and I'm just like, yeah, you're a valid life form. Like, you're not... I don't see myself as above, you know? Like, obviously there are things that I can do that he cannot, but that doesn't change the fact that his perspective and his life is just as valid as mine is. And once you start thinking this way, right, it's very difficult to go along with a lot of right-wing rhetoric. Because a lot of right-wing rhetoric is built around the idea of hierarchy, right? And that there are just some people who are better than others, which is the concept of meritocracy. It's and you can't really go along with it once you understand that, like, no, we're pretty much all equal to one another. Like, we're pretty valid. Like, we're valid in our we're equal in our validity, not our capability. Come on, I was enjoying Infinite Universe so much more. Just scrapped and joined out of the smoking trap. Hey, man, who knows where the world will take us? Who knows? Who knows? Hey, Mox, how you doing, bud? Comrade Trump says Ukraine-Russia crisis is a European problem. For sure. No, the Americans are trying to de-escalate. They stepped in it. They've come to the point where they realize that their options truly are... go to war with China or watch Ukraine get destroyed. Those are the two options on the table. Or option 3, withdraw. Right? Because if they withdraw, then Putin will have no reason to destroy Ukraine, and Ukraine can reestablish its independence, and it should exist as a buffer state. There's just, like, no reason whatsoever for Ukraine to become part of NATO. Like, there's no reason whatsoever. And I really do think that the Americans really stepped in it with Ukraine. Like, they really showed their stupidity, frankly. Like, NATO and Ukraine and America really, really showed the world that they don't really know what they're doing. Like, like, are you serious? Like, NATO was created as a far right... NATO was created as a force to countervail the Soviets and try to destroy the Soviets, right? Like, it's a Cold War organization. with that explicitly stated goal. And you're telling me that it's going to move into Ukraine and share a border with Russia? Nah, bro. Like, nah, that's not going to happen. Right? And it would be dumb to think it should. Right? But it kind of just shows you that the people who are in charge in America don't really understand what they're doing. Right? And that's visible. Like what they did in Iraq. These guys were saying, like, we'll be greeted as liberators and the whole thing will be dusted up in a couple of weeks. Like, these people are fucking stupid. The U.S. wants NATO in Ukraine, and Russia is like, get your capital alliance out of here. Yeah. And you're right about that, though. It does ring heavily to what the U.S. said about Nazi Germany. But it does pay to remember that when Ukraine elected its own leadership, it elected a leftist. Like, it didn't elect like fascists and Nazis. It was electing leftists, and that's why there was a coup to get rid of that guy. The U.S. only fought fascist Germany because they didn't want the Nazis to overpower the U.S., not for their ideology. I think that's true, Barnabas. I think that's true. Yeah, they should withdraw. Right? I think Afghanistan showed NATO doesn't know what it's doing. Yeah, Afghanistan's been doing that since like the 80s. Yeah. And honestly, this is raising a lot of questions about the purpose of NATO. Is NATO valid? Like, what's the goal with NATO? What's the point of NATO? It was so much more fun talking with you when the horrible guy... Yeah, Gooch, I know, bud. I know. I hate to bring it back down. But, you know, you take the good, you take the bad, you take them both, and what do you have? The facts of life. The facts of life. Yeah, yeah, you take the good, you take the bad, you take them both, and what you have? The facts of life. Yeah, the facts of life. Woo, 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 ba boom, ba bum, ba. NATO in politics is like the chur's role in controlling life. Look, I just don't think they know what to do. I think that, like, the existence of NATO really does show you why it's dangerous to set up hierarchies in the first place. Because once a hierarchy is set up, it's difficult to dismantle, right? Like, we should withdraw from NATO. Like, NATO should cease to exist. What's the point of NATO? Like, what's the point? Really? Like, does NATO have a role in the world at all? My answer is no. Like, what's the role of NATO? Like, really? Like, the EU exists. So the EU exists as a unifying body throughout Europe, right? Like, and of course the EU itself has problems, obviously, and those problems are going to be addressed by the citizenry themselves, right? As it all unfolds and all of that kind of stuff. But, like, what's the point of NATO, right? It literally was set up as an anti-Soviet force. Well, the Soviet Union's gone. What's the point of NATO? Right? And so it's just a way for, like, certain states to get together and do stupid shit with one another. Right? It should be dismantled. Hey guys, did you know that climate change contributes to poor mental health? Right? I'm going to file this one into the no shit category. Like, no shit, Sherlock. Like, climate change contributes to poor mental health. No fucking way, bro. But apparently this is something that was studied, right? Supported by a new study, right? This is from the Journal of Climate Change and Health. The study revealed the residents in the westernmost province were more anxious about climate change after the heat wave than they were before it. Yeah, no shit. Climate change literally burnt down a town, right? Big fucking shocker here, guys. Like, it's so funny to me, man, because, like, these sorts of studies are going to have to, are literally going to have to be done. Because there's going to be a segment of the population, right, the segment that's gone psychotic, who's going to have to see these studies. Who are going to have to be like, oh, well, I guess. like, dude, like, it's so dumb. Like, it's so fucking dumb. Yeah, exactly. We're like a parody of civilization, right? Like I used to say this all the time, and I should start saying it again. We're like a Rick and Morty planet. Like Rick and Morty would land on Earth, and would be like, "What's going on here?" And we would be like, and they would be sing, and Rick would just be walking around, just being like, "So you're destroying yourself for nothing? Is that right?" "Oh, geez, Rick. I think these guys are dumb. I think they're stupider than me, Rick." "Yeah, of course they're stupider than you, Morty. But that's what happens when people start worshiping a non-existent entity." I think my Morty's okay, but my Rick could use some work. Anyway. Yeah. Oh no, maybe someone will do something. Nah. These sorts of studies are good for one thing, though, right? And it's worth pointing out that people can feel isolated, right? And I was talking about this earlier in regards to this channel, right? People can feel isolated and alone in their anxiety and their fear. And a study like this that comes out can really help alleviate a lot of that anxiety. And it helps to know that lots of people feel this way, right? That like you're not isolated, you're not alone. You're not an individual individualizing your individualism, and your individualizing is crazy, right? The way that the capitalists have been gaslighting us for the last 40 years, right? You are right. There are lots of people who feel this way. And I feel like this kind of study, while it's kind of stupid, it's also important in that regard. That like people can grab a hold of this study and be like, look, it's normal. Look how normal it is. Right? And honestly, like, doesn't take a fucking genius to figure this out, guys. Like, doesn't take a fucking genius to figure this out. Like, we're just... This is why when someone like fucking Jordan Peterson goes on Joe Rogan's podcast and starts downplaying climate change, like, no longer acceptable. Like, no longer acceptable. That kind of propaganda should be chased out of our discourse completely. Like, I've said it over and over again on this channel, guys. Like, the people who are listed in the climate deception dossier should be put on trial, right? The CEOs and owners of the fossil fuel industry should be put on trial. And I'm very serious when I say I do not believe any political organization is interested at all in confronting climate change until these people are in jail. Yeah, everything is climate, John. And if everything is climate, then you can't really talk about it because everything is the thing that is... It's just fucking word salad nonsense, right? It's all they've got left. They can't legitimately grapple with these issues anymore. All they can do is just fade into word salad nonsense, which is what Peterson did, right? And like the scientific community called him out instantly, right? Like there's the Great Guardian episode where article where like members of the scientific community were just saying like it's nonsense what he's saying. Like he's fucking nonsense and he doesn't actually understand what he's talking about. Donate and join, by the way. Thank you, Barnabas. Always fighting the good fight. Hey, look, Morty, call me Rick. I don't have him in my ear is the problem. I don't have him in my ear. I love Rick and Morty, man. Rick and Morty's got some real smart shit. Like, the pitfall of Rick and Morty is if you start to venerate Rick, right? Yeah. But what is climate? Oh my fucking god, you stupid fucking asshole. Like, stop being such a fucking baby, right? There are experts who have studied this. Maybe listen to those people. Like, this really is the... BoJack Horseman is really good. Real shame what happened to BoJack Horseman, if you ask me. That show could have kept going forever. BoJack Horseman's really good. The... that was a spot-on Peterson. Thank you. Climate change is a waste of energy. We have no control of it. What? We don't have control over the thing that we're doing. Peterson always sucks. It's like saying math is stupid because you can make everything equal 0, yeah. So if the temperature goes up 1 degree, we should blah, blah, blah. Hardly any enemy, blah, blah, blah. Yeah. Razzle dazzle them with words. Throw some glitter in their face. It's working for Shapiro. Right? It's working for Shapiro. Like, if an idiot like Shapiro can make his whole industry, like, Shapiro's entire industry is just talk. Right? Like, doesn't matter what you say, just talk. And just talk as fast as possible. Just rapid fire nonsense. Right? You want to look at somebody who's just like a word salad nonsense creator. Like, Shapiro shows you, beyond the shadow of a doubt, you can make your whole career just by talking about garbage, right? You can just word salad your way to success. It's obviously a chicken who speculated into the future based on being fed each day. Duh. Right. I recently rewatched Futurama. It's pretty good too, yeah. Doesn't really fuck with the casual racism. Don't really fuck with the casual racism towards Asians, though. Yeah, you're right about that, bud. You're totally right about that. Yeah, I mean, you're always gonna, like, that's the unfortunate reality of comedy, right? Like, you're always gonna find that shit. Like, if you go back and take a look at, like, Charlie Chaplin and Buster Keaton, you're gonna find, like, total like casual racism and just like casual, like all this kind of stuff. Like, it totally exists. It's brutal, but it's there. Like, go back in like the Disney anthology, right? Blair White is word salad. I don't know who Blair White is, thankfully. So it just seems to me like the climate change conversation. I was glad to see that Peterson got widely, like, immediately got just like widely ridiculed for his climate change stuff. Because, like, the only people who should be chiming in meaningful ways to the climate change conversation are the experts. And, like, Joe Rogan should have climate change experts on his show, right? And he doesn't. He's just getting the most controversial people he can get on so that he gets clicks. Like, that's all he cares about, right? And, like, I'm kind of glad to see that Joe Rogan is getting his feet held to the fire, because it's like, hey man, like, you keep telling us that, oh, I'll have this controversial figure on, but then I'll also have a person on the other side of it on, right? And we'll compare and contrast views, but you don't do that. And he hasn't been doing that. Like, where are the climate change experts? Where are the people who are, like, literally like, I am a PhD in this subject? Like, where are those people, right? Like, and he just doesn't platform them. He doesn't bring them on, because that's not what his base wants to click on, right? I almost feel sorry for her given how much she hates herself. Oh, wow. I wish Joe Rogan would get Potholer 54 to talk on climate change. Yeah, exactly. Well, we got to hear what Potholer 54 thinks about climate change, man, for the 5th time, right? The way that one Christian conservative lady talked to her, she didn't stand up to her, so sad to watch. Who are you guys talking about? I have no idea who this Blair White person is. Blair White. American YouTuber. So he's just a YouTuber?
It's like, what is a woman?
Well,
Can you tell me what a woman is?
no, I can't.
Womanhood is something that
I hate
is an
this guy
umbrella
so
term.
much, by the way.
It's like, what is...
Like, this guy's a literal fucking neo-Nazi. Like, this guy right here. The idea that this guy's walking around... Is this the guy that I'm thinking about? This is Matt Walsh, right? This is Matt Walsh. Oh, is she a trans
To
woman?
call them it. I'm never calling a person it. I would be more likely to call someone a bug than it.
Right. She's a trans YouTuber that's far right? What? 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 How? How can you be far right and Jackie Chan throw hands up? Like, I guess it's like a black man being Republican, I guess. Like, no, Matt Walsh is, like, we could, hold on, let's just, like, Matt Walsh is fucking unbelievable. Theocratic fascist. We're done here, right? Like, we're done here. Like, he's explicitly calling himself a theocratic fascist. Like, we're good, right? Like, the idea that this guy is platformed anywhere ever, right? If Dr. Phil is having Matt Walsh on his show, that discredits Dr. Phil as a thinker and a speaker. Period. Anybody who brings this guy onto his show as he's walking around calling himself a theocratic fascist, right? You discredit yourself. This guy does not deserve to be platformed ever, anywhere, ever. Right? He's not espousing gray list issues. He's not bringing to light. He's not just asking questions. He calls himself a theocratic fascist. I don't care what any of the clucking hens on The View say about anything. I'm not offended, but live by wokeness, die by it. I hope Whoopi Goldberg is fired. It's what she'd want for anyone on the other side. I mean, you're a fascist, dude. Yeah, we want you fired. And at best, actually. I'm more or less of the opinion that if you're calling yourself a fascist, there's lots of things we should be doing with you. Black people make up 13% of the population, yet nearly 60% of the athletes in the NFL. But still, the NFL is systemically racist against black people. The system is conspiring them to make the world-famous millionaires. I'm so glad Brian Flores is exposing... And this is just random. This is just his most recent shit. Right? Like, this guy is brutally racist. Right? It's a joke, John. Haha, what are you triggered? Lighten up. It's not a joke. It's not a funny joke anyway. If it's a joke, it's not funny, so you suck at what you do. Period. Right? Like, it's not a joke. It's certainly not funny. Like, get the fuck out of here. very simply. Ugh, okay, I'm not going to go down this rabbit hole. And wrote that terribly transphobic book and was selling it as the LGBT kids book. Yeah. And there's a lot of dark money behind them. That's true. That's definitely the truth, right? That's definitely the truth. And like, I'm just blown away. Like, how? Like, you're a trans person. The far right explicitly wants to destroy you, right? Like, that's a defining quality of the far right, that it wants to destroy minority groups, trans people, homosexuals. Right? That's a defining characteristic of the far right. So how can you simultaneously be part of the organization that wants to destroy you? Like, it doesn't... Like, I feel like that fact alone discredits her. Like why does anyone care what this person thinks? Like, that would be literally the only question that I would have. Like, how Andy Negro is gay. Is Andy Negro gay? How about that? Another oddball. I don't get that guy. Like, I don't get why is he in bed with these white supremacists who would literally lynch him if they had the chance. Like, I don't get it. Hey, John, you hear about that hidden Nazi Jew who shot himself when his secret was revealed? Wild. If you don't support a living wage, you're saying that someone who works 40 hours a week doesn't deserve a life of dignity and should be condemned to poverty for the rest of their lives. If you don't support a living wage, I don't question your politics. I question your morality. Yeah. They're all making bank as tokens. I think you've hit it. I think you've hit it onward. Like, that there is just literally like if a billionaire walked up to you and said, hey, here's $1 million. Say what I tell you to say. Lots of people are going to say yeah. I think it's pronounced like no, the G is silent. I think you're right, Generation Y Me. I think you're right. Andy, no. Yeah, you're totally right. Check live if it matters. Let's go. We're almost at the end here, so. Daniel Burroughs is a Jewish American who's a former member of the American Nazi Party. Later, after a falling out with the founder, George Lincoln Rockwell, Burroughs became a Kleagle or recruiter for the New York State branch of the United Klans of America, the most violent Klan group at the time. Burroughs committed suicide. Like, just like, drive the nail into the head. Drive the nail into the head, dude. Like, oh, I did want to report on this. An absolutely enormous wall of solar panels is being installed in Toronto. A colossal wall of solar panels coming to Etobicoke, Toronto. It'll be the largest of its kind in all of North America. So I build my brand as shitting on the West, and there are a lot of things to be shit on here in the West, but hey, it's something. It's something. It's not hard to build the biggest of something if no one else is trying. I'll say that. So these guys are like, it's the biggest wall ever. And I'm just like, yeah. I mean, if there's no one doing anything, it's not hard to do it, right? But, so, there you go. There you go. Things are happening. The wall adds a greener future for Canada and its booming construction industry. Miltrex Incorporated say they foresee a future where every surface can be converted into an energy-generating unit. Yeah, that's what I've been saying forever. I'm just like, what? We should literally put solar panels on every surface that exists. Yeah, doesn't China have mountaintop solar panels? Of course. Of course, right? But, you know, goddamn it, Barnabas. We're trying, you know. We're trying. It's an uphill climb because we're dealing with fucking capitalists. All right, guys. This is the end of this one. What a fun one this one was. This was fun. Like, share, subscribe, hit the bells, hit the whistles, donate some money, all the rest. Thanks so much for being here, guys. Always remember, each and every one of you is a quantum being, living in quantum energy. These billionaires are spending hundreds of billions of dollars to ensure that you never realize it, because then they can turn you into a commodity. Rebel, revolt, repent. Good luck. We're going to need it.